From the committee, or I will need a motion from someone on the committee to go back into open session.
So moved.
Moved by David, do I have a second? Seconded by Joan. We do have one committee member remote this evening, Ms. Stewart, so I will need to be doing roll call votes this evening. So Teresa?
Yes.
Kate? Joan? David?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so we will go back into open session at 7:09 p.m. At this time, I'm going to ask everybody who is in attendance to please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, first order of business is approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes in our packet this evening. We have our open session meetings minutes from December 4th, as well as our December 4th workshop. Does anybody have any questions or discussion on the minutes?
Move to approve both sets.
Moved by David.
From December 4th.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kate. Can roll call vote. So Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Abstain.
David?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that is 4 yeses and 1 abstention. All right, next item on the agenda is correspondence. Mr. Leff, do we have any correspondence this evening?
We do not.
Wonderful. Moving on to the next item is the warrant report. So this week, I signed warrants in the amounts of $2,343,256.28, $516,355.15, $425, $20,162.46, $1,020, $42,274.01, $67,759.12, and $609.20 for a total of $2,991,861.22. Are there any questions on the warrant report this evening? Seeing none, we will move into our next item on the agenda, which is public comment. Reminder to the public that you can access public comment in several ways. You can email the call the superintendent's office by noon the day of our meeting to get a meeting link to our hybrid meeting. You can also put your name on the list of speakers, pre-register for the evening. And lastly, you may also come directly to our meeting at the Savage Center and sign in directly at the meeting. Is anyone here for public comment this evening? Seeing none, I will declare public comment closed at 7:12 p.m. Okay, next item on the agenda, superintendent's report. Mr. Leff, you have several items here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first one on the agenda is an update on school year 24-25 calendar. As you are aware, at our last meeting, I discussed with you a compliance issue that we found with our 24-25 school year, where our last day for seniors and our graduation ceremonies were actually 13 days or 1 day greater than what we were allowed to in terms of allowing students to leave before the other students in their school are dismissed for the year. I shared with you that we had multiple options to consider based on that. One was to hold an early release day rather than a no school day on Good Friday, which was April 18th, I believe, which is in my memo, which would move everyone up 1 day. Another option was to change the graduation ceremony and the graduation date itself, and the students' last day, seniors' last day, up 1 day as well, moving graduation from the 1st, I think, of June until the week following. The other option was to, leave it all alone, essentially. We looked at different options with PD days that we could use. Those weren't available because we had used the PD days already in the year. You had asked me to reach out to DESE to see what, if anything, they would do about flexibility. I will say that they are not flexible with this. However, I will share with you that if we were to keep the same calendar as part of our tiered focused monitoring and review, we would essentially have a finding that our calendar was out of compliance and a requirement to remedy that over the course of the next year and share progress reports along with that. I did do a quick reach out to the community. When I discuss the community, I mean teachers and caregivers. I had 200, as of now, 268 responses, about 46.1% staff, 54% parents and caregivers. Jody and also facilitated, helped get some information from some of the teachers as well. And I asked the questions, what options would you prefer, in those three options that I just shared with you. More than half of the, less than half had said hold a half day on the Good Friday, which was good. A lot of people thought moving a day early to leave school would be great. However, about 30% said try to do everything you can do to keep the calendar the way it is. Another 22% or so said move the last day for seniors, move the graduation ceremony. What that tells me is that you have multiple people here that it would impact if we were to move different days and not do the same thing, and change the calendar. So therefore, my recommendation to you tonight is to actually not do anything and not change the calendar. I feel as if the compliance check from DESE was there on purpose. It's a good check. It's there to tell us and share with us that we have some issues that we're dealing with, and then have them and give us the opportunity to fix them. And that opportunity to fix that would be in the rendition of next year's calendar rather than this year's. So my action that I'm requesting from you tonight is actually to take no action whatsoever on the calendar.
Any discussion?
I was just going to say, I know in the agenda you had sent it earlier and read it, but just thank you. I think you were pretty exhaustive in your options, and I think that the option that you've chosen makes the most sense with the least amount of resistance.
Thank you.
Do we need to, so in that case, do we need to vote on this?
You do not?
So just for the public,
Wonderful.
there's no vote because it's gonna, the recommendation is to stay the same.
The recommendation
There's
is
no
to
change.
keep the calendar
No
as it is
change.
currently
Constitute.
constituted.
That alliteration is nice.
I think we can
No
support that
change.
recommendation of no change, unless anybody would like to make a motion to change anything. Great. Seeing none, we will move on to our next item on the calendar, on the agenda.
Thank you. So I have a late agenda item on a field trip request. You're not here for the field trip request, right?
I am.
You are, Jen?
Yes.
Oh, Jen. So Jen Harton is here. Thank you, Jen. I apologize. Jen, do you want to come up and share what the field trip is? So this came in just at the end of last week, but it's coming to you now because it's within almost the time frame of when you need to approve it for out-of-state travel. But I will let Jen discuss the great opportunity that our kids have.
So the American Choral Directors Association holds an annual conference. This year it is a national conference. On the opposite year, it's a regional conference. This year it's in Dallas. There were more than 5,000 applicants for the choirs. We had 2 students that were accepted into it, which is kind of a big deal. They only accepted about 900 kids total into the ensembles. So they will get to sing for 3 days with a professional at the top of their field. And for me as their chaperone, it's also a conference for me. So I'll have 3 days of conference with, again, people that are in the top of their field in the entire 50 states. So they really seek out the best folks to present. So that's what it is. That's been the short of it.
And all of the appropriate paperwork is in place. You will see the liability insurance pieces in here as per your policy. The itinerary for the students is in here, as well as the cost for the students, which is here as well. So I'm really supportive and excited for these 2 students, Lindsay Collins and Sebastian Eugene.
Mhm.
And thank you, Jen, for bringing this to us tonight. So
Thank you.
any questions from the committee?
We all looked at Joan.
I don't have,
Insurance waiver.
congratulations to those
Thank you.
students. I don't have my only question is why, is this a new form?
This is the form that I got.
This is, I had students accepted last year and the year prior, and this is the same form that I use for all of those.
I'm just, it's an
trips.
extensive approval.
It is
list of-
indeed.
Of people who were signed off on, so we may ask Superintendent Luff to make sure that everybody who's signing off on that is necessary. To help
Indeed.
streamline the process.
I
Like
didn't actually even
cafeteria?
realize this until now, yep, I even signed it the other day, and I was like.
I understand nurse, but cafeteria, yeah, it's,
The cafeteria signed off on this.
I think
I
in
mean,
the
maybe
case,
that's to make sure that
I think
they
in
get
case
fed.
you have like 50 kids, that it will affect the dining hall
Okay.
because they're out school days, so.
Okay.
It's the same, that section C is the same for every single field trip.
Yeah.
If we take them
Because I
like
don't
across the
see
street,
that.
that many people have to sign it.
I don't
So-
recall seeing that before.
I don't think I ever noticed cafeteria, yeah.
Okay.
But I understand what you're saying, exactly.
Yeah.
It was a large
I mean, if
number.
it's 2 kids, they won't even
You
feel
want
it, but
their
yeah.
eyes on
A big
it.
class, yeah, yeah.
Yep, I was just curious. Okay,
Wonderful.
I
That's
don't
a
remember seeing that before.
That makes sense.
It does.
No, but the insurance stuff is there, so I'm happy.
As long as Joan's.
As long as the
good about
insurance stuff is there.
That's right.
Then we're good.
Any other question, discussion? Anybody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by David, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Joan. All right, roll call. Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well.
Thank you.
So that is
Congrats.
Appreciate the support.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Lindsay
Thanks for
and
taking out the
Sebastian.
time tonight, Jen, appreciate it. That is it for my superintendent's report.
Well, that was wonderfully short and sweet. Okay, great. So we will move on to the next items on the agenda. We are moving on to budget. So first, we will get a budget subcommittee update. This was the one that was just me, correct? Yes. Right. I was like, crap, that's me.
I was gonna say, for you, because I was unable to make that meeting.
If it's helpful, I'll put my memo up, it's up to you.
Geez, I did not mentally prepare myself for it. So, yes, we met last week as a budget subcommittee to discuss, actually, mainly the preliminary budget that we have, that we will talk about next. So that was the majority of the meeting and kind of all of the other peripheral, right, things that are going to be connected to that preliminary budget. We did talk about, we had some staffing updates, we had some, I have to look at the budget, I'm so bad, I have to look at the agenda. It seems like it's been 10 years since we had that meeting.
It does.
Because everything was connected to that preliminary budget, and we had it kind of, even though it was out in several different agenda items, which you can clearly see in our drive, it did all kind of end up in one very large conversation because everything was tangential, so.
Some conversations about the financial task force, I think, a little
Yes.
bit.
Yep. Oh, that's actually a really good point. Yeah. So we talked about the financial task force and just making sure that we were in alignment with what the school improvement plan, not the school,
Strategic.
the strategic plan said. We had said that we would have stakeholders from throughout, the town, and it's just appropriate stakeholders as part of that. But just some clarification that what we meant was we would engage those people and they wouldn't necessarily be members on a task force. So just wanted to clarify that, because that had been a little bit of a point of confusion based on the strategic plan directives. But it was a good meeting. We got through quite a bit, and you are going to see the majority of what we talked about in the next presentation. We meet again in January. Teresa, help me. See, you have to look it up too.
8th.
8th, thank you. We meet January 8th. And we'll continue our budget conversations there, and we'll give you an update after that.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Ready for the next part?
Yep, let's
Yeah.
move on to the next and get right into the preliminary budget presentation.
All right, so what I'll share with you now is an overall memo that I drafted, kind of summarizing the preliminary budget that we went through in line-by-line detail, really, in the budget subcommittee. And then Mr. Mannion will go through a slide deck presentation to give you the summary overview, too, of the specific cost centers, and similar to what I'm sharing with you today. As a reminder, Dr. Mannion, Dr. Munoz, and I met with all the cost center managers, solidly reviewed the current budget proposals for next year, and then Sean has done an incredible job putting together a preliminary budget for us very early on. There's still much to be worked on. It's preliminary, but it's a really good starting point to where we need to be. We have now reviewed this with the budget subcommittee. We reviewed this with our cabinet team at the central office. We have had a conversation with the town administration, finance, and Mr. Mizuko, and the principals this morning. So there's different things that we're going through, and and modifying and moving, but we wanted to share this with you tonight. So the highlights of this budget are an 8.1% increase over FY '25. I believe that the conversations last year projected likely around an 8% increase. Not to say that's a small number, but it is a number that, that we came up with as we were going through the process. In this budget, it includes 9.6 FTE positions for the opening of Coakley Middle School. On top of the positions that I've already shared with you, the 8 in the past, we have now added an ELL position, teaching position, as well as a 0.6 administrative assistant to that mix to work with our ELL population, which is growing at the middle school. Actually, you saw somewhat of a request at the end of last year from Lisa to actually increase ELL for middle school this year. She's still making that request now, but I wanted to make sure it was in the budget for next year as well, and we'll talk about any changes we can make for this year. So that's not a new request. It's been there, and something that we've been holding off on as we're going through the budget. It includes the increase in transportation. Now, as you know, we have a bid that is going out right now. That bid includes 2 additional buses for the middle school, and most bids have been coming in anywhere from 10 to 20% increases in different districts, so that is part of that budget. It includes funding for collective bargaining increases that are part of our contractual obligations, as well as increases for yet to be negotiated individual contracts that we'll have to do. It includes an increase in the paraprofessional salary line to ensure that we're able to hire maybe at a higher step for some of our higher need programs tied to some professional development requirements that we're working on. At this time, it includes all operating requests from the specific departments that can be pared down. We're still working through that piece. Mr. Mannion's going to work really hard to get some consistency at the different elementary schools, maybe based on the per pupil allocation and cost, to make sure that each school has similar funds for their kids. It includes, as has been in the budget for many years since the override, funding for the ELA and math curriculum refreshes. There are also, what's not included in these, which is going to be a wish list for us, is 2 full-time behavioral interventionists. We currently have 2. One that is working at 5 of our schools right now. I want to say 5 of our schools, split between 4, maybe 4 schools right now. These additional 2 would allow us to have 2 behavioral interventionists for each elementary school. I'm sorry, to share 2 elementary schools for 1 position. And again, these are the kind of the general education interventionists to put together MTSS, or response to intervention for behavioral needs in our schools. This was a request last year at one of your school committee meetings. And ultimately, I think that was tied into maybe interventionist or title folks, and that was not a great conversation at the time. But this would be part of that budget. And we're hopeful, because we have a new grant that you saw recently, that we brought for your approval last meeting, that we could actually put these into place this year and then get them funded in the operating budget next year. It does not include a speech and language pathologist that we believe may be needed for the middle school next year. I will talk about that in a possible warrant article for your consideration later on today. It does not include the 1 full-time position for the freshman academy, and it doesn't include a position that I'm looking at to focus on the safety of our students. The facilities budget is going to incorporate 1.5 positions for custodians, whereas the food service department is allocating 0.5 of their revolving accounts to fund the other 0.5 to make 2 full-time custodians there. So that is not in the operating budget, but it is in the facilities budget. And then the food service revolving account will also add funding for food service so that would not be in our operating budget either. There are a few warrant articles that we're trying to work with the town on to assist us to try to get some funds available to shift some of these desired positions, improvement positions, into our budget. One of those is related to Mass Health. We're trying to kickstart our Mass Health revolving account, or the account that would be able to take in reimbursements that we get for medically related services provided in schools, and hopefully that account would fund at least 3 positions. One being the speech and language pathologist we're considering for the middle school, and possibly 2 others that are already in the operating. So we had conversations with Mr. Mizuko about how to do that, but one of the considerations for you tonight is if you're okay with language regarding a warrant article to that effect. Another one is the possibility of increasing the special education stabilization fund that we currently have to its maximum amount, which I think in total is about $1.2 million, and using free cash to do that. You know, that's one we can consider. I think the use of free cash in general, whether it comes through the town or comes through the stabilization account to support our budget, I'm happy either way. But I think that's one thing. And there's also one in here that is a little more problematic, and I'll bring it up in conversation, but during the override, the public put in a certain amount for curriculum refreshes every year to the amount of around $300,000. I did not realize that when I was creating this and crafting this, as I've gone through this process, and that's why we work with the town administrator and manager and do all these things, that money is there for a reason, and I want to be thoughtful of that in terms of a warrant article that may have assisted us with those funds. So that, and just finally, just as a breakdown of the 8.1%, 3.8% of that 8.1% is a cost of living and salary increases. 1.5% is for the transportation. 1.2 is for the middle school staff increases, and 1.6 is for the operation side and operating costs of the district. And Mr. Manny will get more into detail with that. But with that, I think the best bet is probably now to have, if you want to ask questions.
Sorry, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
When you say the operating, does that include the custodians?
So the operating costs are really the material, supplies, those kind of things. It does not include
Okay.
the custodians.
No, because they say it's not supposed to, so.
Right. Custodial costs, food service costs are not included here.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I had one other question as well, which is about the busing. Why is it gonna require 2 additional buses for the Copley?
Oh, so this has always been part of the plan.
I know, but I can't wrap my, I need it broken down into concrete terms, because there's that many more 5th graders.
Because there's that many more 5th graders going across
I know.
town with Sean. Do you want to talk about?
Middle school is usually the most busing because you're bringing
'Cause
the
they're way
whole
over the other
town
side,
to
yeah.
a school that's on one side of the town. So
Yes.
moving the 5th grade up is gonna add quite a lot of transportation. At the same time, we're not reducing any of our number of elementary schools, even though fewer students are gonna be getting on those buses,
Yeah.
it's still gonna
Those routes
require
remain
the
the
same
same.
number of buses. So just the 5th grade moving up to a middle school from where they're now going to 5 schools and now they're gonna be going to 1 school, that's gonna require 2 additional buses. The good thing is, we're basically at our maximum, right? I mean, we're at our absolute max on transportation right now. We're running into issues left and right, but we're able to accommodate because we do in-house, so we can supplement our yellow buses with some of our vans. In a couple of years, when the elementary goes into effect, we won't need any additional buses at that point in time. We may even see some relief on some of those. We won't really see a reduction in the number of buses, but once we add the 2 for the middle school next year, that'll hold us through when we do the elementary changes.
I like the word relief.
But the routes at the elementary don't change next year, but we do have more kids going to the middle school, so we have to have 2 additional buses to go get them, based on the numbers.
Does that allow us to wiggle the elementary school times a little bit later?
That's,
I'm still working through that process.
Or not until Willet comes online
I
as an
think not
elementary?
until Willet comes online as a K through 4, but
Okay.
I will look, I will look at that, and look at the elementary and the middle school times, as a bit of a request from just about everyone to take a look at those things.
It's just, we made a standing promise, so whenever
Yep.
we could, we would look at pushing by not a significant amount, but by pushing to push that later.
Yeah, like 10 minutes.
There's no good way to explain that
No.
succinctly.
It was
so I'm
elementary
pissed
10
off.
minutes later, middle school 10 minutes earlier, something along those lines, is what I've been having requests for.
Teresa?
We never promised to touch the middle school. The promise we made when we were in tax bargaining was that the close we open, we would look at getting the elementary as close to 8 o'clock as possible. That was the promise of the school committee.
Thank you.
Fair enough. I was just saying the request that I've had to take a look at different things.
Yeah,
So-
you've had that request, right?
My questions.
So do you, it's just in terms, because Sean
Yeah,
did
so-
create a slide deck for this too.
Right.
and
Can
I
I
just-
Sean go first?
I know.
I know.
Yeah, but he
You're
has
gonna
some pretty
block
good things
me
in
out of
there.
asking the questions?
No, we're
No, we're
joking.
just wondering if you want to wait until after Sean does his presentation.
No, my
Because it
only
might be
question,
under-
it was specific to a position.
Sure.
Oh, sure.
FTE for the freshman academy, is that teaching, or is that administrating, or is that what?
That is mostly counseling and guidance,
Okay.
kind of a position to
Yep.
support those kids and the teachers as the kids come into freshman academy. Just for
Okay.
those of you who don't know, it's been a great team piloting a freshman academy project, preparing to facilitate students transition into freshman year, and then to get them prepared to be successful over the course of the next 4 years. Teachers have put a tremendous amount of effort into that so far, and Dr. Galligan has really supported and has been making this request for a while, and I'm hoping to support him in that as we do that.
Excellent, thank you.
I was saying Tim should have had Sean go first, not.
Like everyone else has
No, I wasn't blocking you out.
I'm just gonna go ahead and open up.
Okay.
Do you want to open or
Yeah.
you want me to open?
Why don't you do it? I'll just follow along. All right, thank you, everyone. So we'll do a quick overview, hopefully not too lengthy, of the preliminary budget. A lot of this is going to be similar information to what you just heard, so hopefully it'll sink in. You should be in receipt of the whole budget. We produced a budget which is sort of the budget, the way you're used to seeing it, with all the different individual line items. We're not going to go through that amount of detail here. I will say a lot of the assumptions Superintendent Luft already covered. We are still looking at FY25. We've only done one quarter, so we're still adjusting our assumptions on our current year, and we still need to make quite a few budget transfers. So if you do go through the line by line, you may see some variances on salary lines and things like that. Most of those are due to the fact that we have not yet adjusted our FY25 budget for our current staffing with the retirements and the new hires. We've done just a handful of budget transfers to date, so we expect that in January we'll be coming through with some more budget transfers. So this is preliminary. That won't change the request in 26, just adjusting 25, but it will change the way the variances look on many of the lines. All right. So overall budget, we're moving from a 25 adjusted budget of close to 573 FTEs on the operating budget. This is not revolving in grants, 61.2 million, and the preliminary budget, proposed budget, is a staffing of 582.5 FTEs. It's an increase of 9.6 FTEs, all related to the middle school opening, and $66.175 million. It's an increase just under $5 million and 8.1%. This we went over in the last memo. So this is sort of another way of looking at the increase. When we look at all of the base salaries, including the cost of the collective bargaining agreements that exist, the step increases, the column transfers, the COLA increases, plus reserves for the bargaining that we still anticipate we'll need to do for next year, there's an increase of 2.3 million, or 3.8% over the year before. So if we just brought forward our salaries and made no changes, our budget increase would be 3.8%. Transportation is one of the largest increases for next year for 3 reasons. We have a contract that's expiring. We also need to increase our driver and monitor rates. We're projecting hourly rate increases, and we're also seeing increases in costs for McKinney-Vento. So that's a $900,000 increase. It's 1.5% of the budget increase. There's the 9.6 staff additions for Coakley, the new middle school. That's a 1.2%. So after those 3 items, our request is a 6.5% budget increase. And then all of the rest of the increases, which at this point in time, principals have put sort of their ideal budgets. We know that we may have to look at those, give those a hard look. It includes everything from tuition, supplies, equipment, curriculum materials, and that's a $977,000 increase, or 1.6%, and that all adds up to the 8.1%.
Is that's reimbursable, right? But not to the full amount?
It's reimbursable, but not to the full amount, and sometimes there's a lag. So
Okay.
we're seeing an increase this year, which we haven't reported on. In first quarter, it looked pretty good. I mean,
Okay.
it may be that the credits catch up with that. We'll look at that before we present the final budget.
Okay.
There are quite a few funding sources for the homeless transportation at McKinney-Vento, so we'll have to see how that's looking. But the costs are definitely as high as ever. I know the transportation is I see the bills.
Yeah, my follow-up question is McKinney-Vento is federal, correct?
McKinney-Vento is federal, there's a federal, yeah.
Do we anticipate that that budget item will be impacted with the new administration?
It's hard to say at this point in time.
I actually don't know if
Yeah.
McKinney-Vento funding is federal. The McKinney-Vento
Okay.
law is federal. I don't know that we get federal funding for it, but the state actually helps us with McKinney-Vento students who are transitioning from
Okay.
state.
That's true,
That-
yes.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
right.
That sounds right.
I also
Okay.
saw the very confused looks on my colleagues' faces. This slide didn't make it into our
Yeah.
version.
Oh, I'm
so-
sorry.
No, totally fine. I just want to, after the meeting, make sure that this
So
version
if-
gets into what the.
If you do wanna follow along, it's actually attached to the memo. It just didn't get into
Just
the
link it
drive.
through
Here we
them,
go.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep,
I just
that's
want to
it,
make sure the
that's-
correct one gets
You're
to.
looking at the,
I also just want to make sure the
Oh,
correct
sorry.
one gets to Priscilla for the actual, like, archiving.
100%. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. That must have been very confusing.
It was.
I was like,
Sorry.
I don't know where
Yeah,
that slide is.
but if you go to the memo, you'll see that it linked right there to the
Got it.
memo, and then you'll be able to.
The rest of the slides, some of the rest, because this was being worked on today, might also not be in the one you're looking at. All right? We'll go to the next one.
Yep.
So this is a breakdown in the major categories that we're used to looking at in our budget. They're categories by DESE function, so you can see the increases by the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, et cetera. We're not gonna go through all those individual lines which exist in the budget, but we'll do a slide on each one of these and just sort of give you the highlights of each of these areas and the increases that are under them. Okay? DESE function 1,000, this is district leadership and administration. It's a total budget of 1.9 million. This includes school committee, central office, business office. It includes some district-wide technology like the student information system. Major increases here, legal services, we're increasing by 25,000. The total budget will be 100,000. So current year it's 75,000 and we're seeing costs above 100,000 this year, but we're expecting they'll come back down, but we still need to increase that line. District-wide technology, which includes the student information system, we're expecting an increase of 26,000 there. All in all, this area is increasing by 7%, but it's only a 0.2% of the total 8.1%. So of the 8.1%, the district leadership and administration is a 0.2% increase. 2,000, this is the huge area. This is the bulk of our budget, 50.7 million. This is essentially all instruction. So there's many different areas under this. District 2100 is the academic leadership, department chairs and team chairs. Currently, no proposed changes in FTEs there, no major changes in the expenses. 2200 is the school building leadership. That's the principal's offices and the offices at the schools. There's a 1.0 middle school assistant principal increase and a 0.6 middle school admin assistant. I think they have either 1.4 or slightly more, but it's an increase in one of the part-time positions at the middle school.
They have a 1, they have a 0.4, and they have, I think, a 0.7 or 0.75, something along those lines. So this would increase the 0.4 to a full-time position.
So when you look at the enrollments next year, the middle school will actually have more students than the high school, and this will bring their assistant principals up to the same level as the high school and bring their office support up to an amount that will be comparable. The 2,300 is the teachers. This is classroom teachers and special education teachers. So just so you know, when you go through the detail, we're shifting 12 regular classroom teachers from elementary schools to the middle school. So you'll see minuses at the elementary schools for the 5th grade teachers that will be moving up. That's not an increase, it's just a shift. We're also shifting 2 special ed inclusion teachers from elementary to middle school. So there's some minuses at the special ed teacher lines for the elementaries. And we're also balancing out the inclusion caseloads at the elementary. So there's also some shifts between the elementaries. So 2 of those special ed inclusion teachers go to the middle school. It's not a net increase there either. It's another shift. And then on top of that, we're adding 2 more special education teachers, 1 inclusion and 1 PLC. We're adding 4 specialists at the middle school for art, music, wellness, and world language, and 1 ELL teacher. This is all similar to what was described in the memo, but it's a net increase at the end of the day of 7 teachers. But again, the elementary is going to see a decrease, and the middle school is going to see an increase.
And as an aside, we're meeting as an instructional transition team for CMS right now. We had one of our first meetings the other day and really had more conversations about specials. Specials are one of the most challenging things because the schedules, the way they're set up at the elementary level, don't lend themselves to just taking a person and moving them the elementary up. It just, there's no physical way to do that based on the schedule. So we're working on that. And working with that team, it's currently believed that with these additional staff, especially the specialists, we'll be able to offer a robust program for these particular areas at the middle school when we open up.
So 2,300 other teaching services, speech, PT, substitutes, summer stipends, paraprofessionals, library, distance learning. Currently, we're not proposing any changes in FTEs for any of these areas. Substitute costs, there isn't quite a large increase there. We've seen a lot of need for substitutes, and we've seen more success in filling those roles this year, at least in the first couple quarters, so we'll have to continue to watch that. Right now, we're increasing the substitute line. Professional development, this is all stipends and costs for PD. There's no FTEs under there. The tuition reimbursement went up in the new Unit A contract from $88,000 to $100,000. That's the cap on all the tuition reimbursements that the teachers put in. No other major changes there. 2,400, this is all of the stuff that's involved in the instruction, the materials and the equipment. It includes new curriculum pilots, implementation, which we discussed for ELA and math. They'll need to pilot those first to see which curriculum will go into effect in which years. It includes textbooks and materials for science, which possibly will be purchased in spring of next year for the following year. Includes tutoring and translations. It includes instructional hardware, such as the Chromebooks and teacher laptops, photocopiers for the classroom materials, and instructional software. All of those things that go into the classroom that the teachers and students use. 2,700 is guidance, counseling, and testing. There's an increase of one guidance counselor at the middle school for the fifth grade moving up. No other major changes. And then for psychological services, no proposed changes in FTEs. There's an increase of $17,500 for contracted services that provide services to our students but aren't done in-house.
Before
So-
you jump onto that next part, Sean, so one of the things, just look at the psychological service piece there. One of the reasoning behind the possible warrant article for the stabilization fund was that we're going to get audit results for student services May 30th. And we want to be in a position where if there are recommendations that are really come from that we have the funds to be able to do that, because it's going to be after budget season when that happens. So just, that's one of the other underlying reasons for that. Sorry, thank you.
So all in all, for this area, the total FY26 preliminary increase is $3.85 million, or 8% on this line alone. That includes all the contractual increases for all of those salaries. It includes the new FTEs. It includes the adjustments in the expenses that we mentioned, and this is the bulk of the 8.1% increase. It's 6.3% of the total increases in instruction, which makes sense. It's a large part of what we do. So 3,000 are other school services. Attendance and parent liaisons is a very small area. It's mostly grant funded. Medical and health services, that's the school nurses. No proposed changes in FTEs. We project that we'll be able to open the middle school with the same number of FTEs at the moment. Student transportation, as we mentioned, this is a big area of increase that's not always going to be as big as it is. It's sort of every 3 or 4 years you get hit with this, and we have a yellow bus contract that we're going to have to bid out. We're running into a lot of issues hiring our in-house drivers and monitors for the special education aspect, the McKinney-Vento aspect as well. And just so you know, this area also includes all of the credits, such as transportation credits, federal state funding for the homeless transportation, like we just were talking about, as well as Circuit Breaker does reimburse for special education transportation. Those credits are all assumed in the increase that we're putting forward here.
Hey, Sean, wouldn't it be great if we could do the transportation bid every 5 years instead of every 3? Just
That would be wonderful.
We'll
Yeah.
work on that.
Next time. That could be a future warrant article. Right, a couple other services, food services. This is not the large school nutrition, that's a revolving account. This is the stipends that the teachers get to monitor the lunch. Right now, we're staffing those at approximately 2 stipends per lunch wave. So like if an elementary school has 2 waves of lunch, then they have 4 stipends. And that's a bit of an increase over what we budgeted this year, so we're a little over our projection, and we're projecting a total budget of $130,000 next year, which is an increase of $30,000, but we'll be spending more than the $100,000 we have this year, just to staff that. Athletics, no proposed changes. It includes the new trainer position that we added. It includes $50,000 of increases on things such as officials, equipment, dues, repairs, things that are needed to keep the athletic services going. And it does take into account some credits for athletic fees. And then lastly, there's a area for the audiovisual department. It has 1 FTE for the director of AV and no major changes there. So overall, this area, as would be expected, is an increase of $914,000, which is a 16% increase on this area itself, and it's 1.5% of our total 8.1% increase.
Other.
Sean,
All right?
I don't understand how we are over budget on lunch waves.
It's the stipends, so the stipends themselves were budgeted at just around $100,000, but what we found out was that they weren't consistently allocated, so we've sort of established the formula, which is every lunch wave at a school, so at least in the elementary, they get 2 stipends. We've had some increases because of that this year. A couple of schools had requested an increase in the number of waves because they were at a breaking point where 2 waves wasn't working. So I think Cleveland and another school moved, maybe Callahan, to 3 lunch waves. They also have Callahan has a small cafeteria. So when they moved from 2 waves to 3, they went from 4 stipends to 6 stipends. Plus, I think the area was just a little under budgeted. So next year, we're actually taking into account that they'll have fewer students. So they're all going to be reduced back down to 2 lunch waves. No elementary schools are going to have 3, but we still need to increase it a bit. And that stipend does increase in the contract as well, so we need to adjust that.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's not this overall Chartwell's, the school nutrition, it's just the stipends.
I was just trying to, I mean, my kid knows when they have lunch to the minute, so I was trying to figure out, like, how did we not know when lunches are happening? I can also
yeah.
tell you what's served every day of the week, if you like. So it was just the repetitiveness of it just struck me as odd that there was an overage in stipends, and I didn't understand
I
how
think
that was happening.
there's an inconsistency that we've sort of established a formula for
Got
and
it.
now going
Okay.
forward.
We had added a few because it was a safety issue too with some of the lunch speeches, so overcrowded.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
If you've ever been in a lunchroom, you know, at the elementary
No,
level.
thank you. I
Yeah.
trust you. I was just curious as to how that happened.
I did my lunch monitor duties at
Oh,
the
thank you.
Willet way back in the day, and no, thank you.
Anne Marie, just
Yes.
a question for Sean.
yeah.
Oh,
Go
sorry. On 3100, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
for attendance and parent liaison services, is this different, Superintendent Leff, is this related to or totally separate from, which could be the case, from the topic that we discussed, I think last meeting, around utilizing space in the Savage for sort of a family liaison office of types? Do you remember that conversation?
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So if
That's
we were to be funding positions out of that, we're not requesting positions in that process of having that family engagement center, so to speak. But if we were funding positions out of that, specifically, it could go here.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
is an argument that, you know, our attendance officers or some of our principals assistant principals could be part of this, you know, and or even our parent liaisons that we have right now, family liaisons could be part of this if they were part of the operating budget, but they're not funded that way right now.
So it doesn't affect this because that's more of that's a separate sort of programmatic, like, logistical thing, not a staffing issue.
Correct.
Right.
If we were
It
to
would
add,
just be more of a rearrangement of things. Okay,
Yep.
thank you. I just want to make sure we weren't.
Of course.
Yeah,
missing that.
and most everything, we're adding family liaisons this year. Most things in this 3100 category for right now are being paid by grant funds.
Okay.
Yeah. 4,000, these are getting to some, this area is a lot of technology. 4,000 operations and maintenance of plant. We have some cell phone expenses for administrators, not a very large budget item, no changes. We have maintenance of equipment, which includes classroom furniture. So there are quite a few requests from principals, not huge dollar requests in the bigger scheme of things, but an increase of 47,000. A lot of the furniture, especially in the elementary schools, it's getting aging. We know we're going to be moving to a new elementary model. We're also looking at the surplus that's going to be coming out of the middle school. So we're going to maximize using the furniture that's coming out of the middle school. For instance, the cafeteria tables at the middle school are relatively new. So we'll use them maybe somewhere else, such as at the high school. But still, there are requests for furniture increases in this budget. We'll still be looking at this area. We're not saying this is the final, what we're
Right.
putting forward, but right now, there's an increase of 47,000 for various classroom furnitures. And then the 4,400 is essentially a lot of the IT staff. I think it's like 7 FTEs. It includes software licensing and supplies. There's no projected increase in the FTEs, no other real major changes in that area. So the overall increase is 65,000. This is a smaller area. It's only $850,000 out of the budget, and it's a 0.1% increase out of the 8.1. Sort of that last 0.1. These next two areas are very small, but there's one thing to note here. 5,000 is the benefit and fixed charges, and this did have our employee separation costs. So actually, this area is showing a decrease in next year's budget because we've moved that to the town compensated absences. So overall, this area is a decrease of close to $62,400. It's a large percentage increase because it's a very small area, and it actually cuts 0.1% out of our ad. So if we weren't doing that and moving to the compensated absences, we'd have a 8.2% increase. 6,000, this is another very, very small, there's just a small decrease of $2,000 here. It has some behavioral surveys and some other small costs. It's an area that's only got $6,500, but it's got its own function. And lastly is the 9,000. So this is a large budget area of $6 million. This is essentially all of our out-of-district tuitions. And there's a good news story here in that we've budgeted in the current year. So a lot of credits and offsets happen to tuition. So when you look in the operating budget, what's budgeted is not what we actually spend. So I've been showing this in our quarterlies. What we're actually spending in tuition was budgeted this year at close to $11.9 million. That's for roughly 81 to 82 students going out of district. And right now in our quarter 2 projection, we're projected to spend about 11 million of that. So we're under budget in the current year, and that's helping us go into next year. We're projecting 11.5 million next year, but it's a decrease in the budget because we're coming down from a budget that we have a surplus in the current year. It still includes the credit from the SPED reserve next year, so we're still including dependence on the SPED reserve of 550,000, so that's something to think about. And it has a circuit breaker credit of 4.951 million, so it's a decrease in that credit assumption. So we do have to make up a little bit of that. We're projecting to use less circuit breaker next year. Overall, it's only a $70,000 increase, and it's only 0.1% of the budget. That's a very amazing thing when you think about out-of-district tuition. And I know the overall budget increase of 8.1% isn't small, but in most years, you're adding a lot to this tuition line. Our increase would be a lot higher if we weren't saving this much on this line. But to say that, we may need to keep digging into this. By the time we get to the final budget, we may need to increase this line a little bit more. We'll have to keep seeing how the placements and the pending placements come in this year, because this is the largest non-salary expense area, and it's very volatile. But right now, this is a really good situation story.
And I will share just a quick story on out-of-district placements. The more we support our in-house special education programs and shore those up and provide expert teachers and paraprofessionals in those programs, the more likely we'll have a reduced number of out-of-district students. the more we shore up our general education behavioral interventions through MTSS and different things, the less likely we're going to have students eligible for special ed for some of the emotional issues that are occurring. And I just want to kind of lay that out, like that's the path that we really need to really focus on as we move forward, because this is a very high cost for out-of-district students, and when we can't support students due to disability, we have an obligation to pay for these out-of-district placements. But I'd really like that mindset of what can we do general ed-wise to start that process of reducing the need for special ed in. And then if we're going to have students within our district that are in programs, let's make sure that those programs have the expert staff and the professional development there for those folks to do what's right for our kids.
One quick question, just on that, Anne Marie, for Tim, is we saw a spike in recent years, and we were not alone. This was a trend all over the country, right? And this is a very general question, but is that trend leveling off, going down? I don't think it's going down, but is it still on just a real general, like, do you know if the trajectory is up or leveling, or if we can tell at this point?
Let me do some research on that. I mean,
Okay.
I think, obviously what you're referring to is you had a significant number of students that were out of school during the pandemic and
Right.
had a significant, regression when they were out of school, which when they came back, we weren't able to program for them, and then they would go out of district. It was different in every district based on what was provided during COVID.
Okay.
I will share that with you. There was some report from BC, but a year and a half ago that talked about Massachusetts schools and how well they did during COVID, and there was it was different everywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a exact science to it.
Okay.
But I would imagine now that we're getting kids and we're getting past that we should see a reduction. I mean, I can't make that promise, but let me look at some research.
Yeah, it might be early to tell. Thank you.
That's essentially it.
Now you can ask questions.
Sorry.
Now there might not be any questions left.
Does anybody have any questions, discussion? Teresa.
Yeah, thank you. I have a number of questions, most of which I'll wait till next budget subcommittee. Really dive into cost center, but just a couple of high levels, Sean and Tim. So if you go back to the community services line, yeah, the 6,000, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You put there, including cost for the youth behavioral survey. Do we still have that at about 1,500?
So I just have a note. I mean, again, this is a very small area. I have a budget of $6,500. So we're compared to the 67 million of the budget, it's very small. The note I have, and I only started in July, is Metro West Youth Behavioral Survey, Minds Matter Interface Referral Helpline.
So interface is still there.
Yeah, so there's a couple things we might need to look into and talk to with our colleagues through Impact North and the health department. The youth behavioral survey, we usually contribute about $1,200 to $1,500 a year, but the health department's been having a harder time finding that money in the Impact North grant to cover the rest, which is like $15,000. So there's been some discussion of could we contribute a little bit more. So we'll want to look into that.
Okay.
And the other thing that was taken out of our budget the last two cycles, but may need to go back in, is we did a number of years ago sign a commitment to co-fund the interface referral system. The last two cycles of the budget, Stacey Lane at the health department used some of the ARPA money. So she didn't need anything from our budget, but I believe that ARPA money is now gone. And at one time we were paying half of it, which was about $8,000. So we may want to check in with them and see, because we don't want to lose that service for our town.
Interface is a fantastic service.
Yeah, the Interface Girls through William James College. So those are two things you should talk to with Connor Brosnan and Stacey Lane. When you were talking about the sub costs and the increase for subs, one thing the committee had tried to get last year and we never got, but maybe this year we could get from you, Tim and Sean, is a sub report, just to help us understand a little bit more what's going on in that area.
Sure. That could be part of the Q2 report, which we're doing in January.
Yep.
We could try to report
That'd be
on
great.
this.
That'd be great, thank you. The improvement budget, which I know isn't included in tonight. But those positions, 2 behavioral interventionists, 1 SLP, 1 freshman academy, and then 1 director of safety and SEL. I believe if I did my rough math right on what those ranges for those positions could be, that would be roughly $470,000 to $500,000. Is that accurate?
I think that would be about right, Teresa, yes.
Okay. So is that something that going forward in the budget process you're bringing back to us, or is that you and your team looking at how to get that in instead of something else?
I think at this point, 8.1% is a big number, and I want to recognize that, even though it's something that was assumed. I want to recognize it's a large number, right? As the town is working with the town and our constituents and our partners. So I would like to see where we can shore down some of the other parts of the budget that we see. There's some things in there that we've already noticed that we need to fix up and all those kind of things, and try to be able to get those positions within that current 8.1%. That would be my idea and my hope. If we were able to move a few of the medically related service providers, right? When I say that, I mean OT, PT, those ones that are reimbursable under Mass Health, for example, into some kind of a revolving account. Then maybe that opens up a few positions there too. So there are things like that I would like to try to do to be able to get those positions into the current 8.1%. So we're not going too far above what the town had provided for an option for this year. A long time ago, right? I think it was last year they made that comment. But.
Okay. And just for the community, I mean, we have heard for 3 budget cycles now about getting in more behavior interventionists, so that's something we've been talking about. I think the SLP, the speech and language pathologist, Lori told us last year she thought we would have that need, so that's not new on our radar. The freshman first year academy, Dr. Galligan has been talking about for a while. If we don't fit that position in, Mr. Luff, can we not run the academy?
I do not think that we can, and so I'm going to do everything I can to push that position into the budget somehow.
Okay.
Whether it's reducing something else, try to get it in. I think that's something there's been so much work done for that, and I do not believe that the teachers would be able to manage that program and have that support to do that, because they have other teaching duties as well. So.
Okay, thank you. And then the last area question for right now, the $300,000 for the curriculum refresh. I think it said on the slide we were looking at both ELA and math, but on the spreadsheet that I have, it's ELA is next year and math's the year after.
That's correct. Yeah, so, and I'm not sure if JJ is still here, but that is correct. There's conversations about which one we possibly want to do first or not do, and have to have flexibility around it. And just as a reminder, there's going to be some pilots done, and there might be no request for a change, right, or materials either. There's also the questions of, hey, we're doing ELA possibly next year, and then math the year after, and is that too much, for example, for the elementary staff to take on 2 new curriculums year by year? So that is really close in scheduling, so there's conversations about that. And do we want to do math first? Do we want to do ELA first? We just wanted to leave it open and bring those back for recommendations for you. But JJ, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Dr. Munoz?
No, I think, Sam, that you covered it pretty well. We think it'd be a really hardship for the elementary teachers to do 2 curriculums back to back. And so we want to be able to look at both sets of curriculum and determine which one is a higher need that we may want to refresh now, and which one do we want to extend, and try to get those cycles not back to back, where it's maybe every 3 years we're looking at those 2, because those are 2 big ones for us. So that's why we don't know if it's going to be ELA. We know it's, to your point, Teresa, ELA is on the list, and then math is after that, and then science is after that. So that doesn't make sense to go do all 3 back to back for elementary. Upper secondary schools, it's okay because they all teach individualized subjects, but not for elementary. So that's what we're trying to revisit. Look at that.
Okay, and then just as you're looking at the curriculum refresh, kind of piggybacking on my questions last meeting around world language, we had like a world language refresh not until FY28, and I feel pretty strongly that's too late, especially as we're looking at a 5-through-8 model and you're assessing what's going on with world language there. So if there's any way to move that up, especially if you're trying to space out the other bigger ones, that's something I would encourage to look at in the budget.
We're always flexible to do stuff like that because, as you know, like this year was supposed to be secondary health and wellness, but we were able to fit it into the budget last year. So whenever we have flexibility like that, when we go through our curriculum refresh, we would definitely look to see what we can pull up and pull in, so.
Well, that's great. And then I'll say one more thing about curriculum, and then Mr. Lefton and Anne-Marie, you can say if you want to talk about it now or wait till we get into the warrant article. So although we did, when we advocated for an override, put in a broad document that year, FY19, we needed $300,000. That was to do an ELA refresh at the elementary level that wasn't done in over a decade. And in our override pledge and all of the extensive documents we included, we did say that we would want to have an annual expenditure in our budget every year for a refresh. We did not say it would be $300,000 every year. We did not make that promise. And if you look back at our last 3 budget cycles, the current one we're in, last year's and the year before, we did curriculum refresh. To JJ's point, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, but we have not spent $300,000 per year on curriculum refresh in 3 budget cycles. So I would like to ask that we look at that money, because again, if my rough numbers of $470,000 is needed for those positions for an improvement budget, is half of that able to be reallocated through the curriculum refresh, because that would be under the authority of the school committee, not the town, to determine how our budget plays out line by line.
Do we want to talk about this now, or?
What's all questions? So I'm happy to. I mean, the actual warrant article discussion is part of the budget conversation too. I mean, I had it in the memo, so I'm happy to talk about both. I will share that, in discussing the actual March town meeting warrant article possibilities with Mr. Mizuko, he was sharing with me that that is really limited. It doesn't have to be, but for the most part, it's limited to land use type of warrants. So.
No, I know it is.
Yeah,
I
it
just
is the way
thought-
they broke it
but-
out, and obviously we have something that we need to bring into the, I mean, it's a town meeting.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a conscious effort of the town to try to break up the town meetings into more digestible pieces and more focused pieces, so that it wasn't multi-nights of craziness in May.
And the reason I'm bringing it to you tonight is because I just want it on the radar, right? That those would be appropriate kind of considerations for warrant articles, whether it's now or it's in May or whatnot, just for conversational pieces. I'm not opposed to making a request for a curriculum refresh. We might not even have to use all that money, right? Depending on what it is, we might pilot something and find that we're not ready to purchase something new, and that money, if it was a part of a warrant, it would fall back to the free cash at the end. It would, right? So it's one of those ideas too.
Trish, I have something too.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm not trying to take away money from curriculum at all. I fully support that, but just as we're looking at what we promised in the past, what we said in the past is very important to me about what we did or did not say, and then just looking at what is under the direct authority of the school committee versus what we would need to go back to the town to. If, as we go through this budget process, we feel very strongly as a school committee and admin team that we need to get those positions in, we should not be asking for free cash to fund reoccurring positions.
Right.
But I would make an argument we could ask for some free cash to help with curriculum. So just wanted to think about that.
Are we doing this conversation now? 'Cause I'm actually against that. That's how we ended up needing the override, was we kept needing free cash to do curriculum, and that should be part of our annual operating budget. You have to refresh curriculum on an annual basis. So I don't want to get into the habit of doing that. I think we should go and just ask for a realistic operating budget, which would include, hey, guess, it's not a surprise that we're building the middle school. It's not a surprise that we've got to add those positions, and we've got to figure it out as a town. I don't want to get into a situation again where we are constantly pushing curriculum off, because then we're in the same situation we're in where we needed the override, which was we've pushed it off for a decade, and we've done that across the board, right? And then, oh crap, everything's out of compliance.
But is Teresa saying, I don't think she was saying, let me ask for clarification, that we take it out of the annual. Are you just saying for this year, for 26, to shift the 300,000 to oh no, because if it's operational, it has to be part of that the whole time.
I don't think Teresa is trying to take money away from curriculum. We're just seeing the slippery slopes differently, and we're picking which slope we want to go. We're picking a different slope to slide down. That's all.
Yeah, no, it's just really important to me transparency of how decisions in the past have been made and how they'll be made going forward. And I mean, Joan, you and I think we're the only two on the committee during the whole override experience, and I remember exactly what we advocated for.
Yep.
Because I was at all those BBC meetings, and I know we said and I know we didn't, and curriculum is absolutely important.
Yep.
But as a school committee, again, we are the body that has the authority that as we go throughout this process in the next 3 months and help support our administration, we're the ones that get to say, if we only have X amount of money, where in the line, in our budget line, does it go? And I fully support curriculum. I don't want anyone to say that I'm not. But if we're in a place where we have to make some really hard choices, which we probably will be, if there's alternative sources of funding elsewhere, free cash can be used for some things and can't be for others. That's all I'm saying.
And I'm saying it's December, no hard choices yet.
I will say that this was actually a conversation we had during the budget subcommittee that, exactly to Joan's point, that once you take it, quote, out of the budget, like how do we get it back in to make sure that it's covered in later years? Because you're right, this year we may not need it because maybe, as JJ said, we're gonna, we don't wanna have these back-to-back refreshes. Maybe we decide, as Ms. Fluff said, that we don't need a refresh this year because it's just not necessary. Yes, that money gets freed up. You could hire someone this year, but then how do you fund them both when you do need the refresh next year? So I this was actually part of the conversations that we had, and I do agree with Joe, and I don't want to, it's nice to find that you ultimately don't need the money and you can allocate it somewhere else, but it's really tricky to make that into positions when it's something that you should be funding year on year.
But it's only December. We don't have to have this fight yet. We got like a whole month or something before we need to have this fight. Like, great.
I support my strategy, that's all. I don't actually see anything in our packet on warrant articles tonight, so are we saying that we're just talking in theory about things that we may put forth for May and we're not putting anything forth for March? Because that also gives us more time to figure these things out.
If you look at the very bottom of my memo, it talks about 3 possible warrant articles for consideration. There's language, general language that could be used. Having said that, I think it's just for conversation. I think what I'm asking for is conversation tonight, because I don't think that we're going to be seeing it going to March town meeting.
Right.
Unless you desire that to happen, in which case you would have to make some kind of a vote on some of this language tonight, or at least consideration of putting forth an article with similar language.
Wait, when's it due? Sorry.
If it was for March, we would have to do it.
It's due before our next meeting.
It's like
Okay.
January 10th, they need the draft language for March.
Okay.
If we were doing March.
Right.
So
Can
I
I-
wanted to put it on here just so you had it, so you had that option to
And we
consider it.
approved, sorry,
Okay.
apologies.
No, you're fine.
But we approved the budget in March, right? Like, so. how does
Yes,
that-
but some of it's free cash stuff.
Right, but I know what you're saying, Kate,
our
but if we
budget
approve the
process
budget,
would be done.
right, before we would get warrant articles on the docket in May, right? So you're kind of putting the cart before the horse, basically, or,
Welcome to budget.
right.
No, that's what I'm asking, like, do we, yeah.
Not anything we haven't done before.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
The
Okay.
budget is done, but then town meeting votes on it in May.
Oh, right, and then we go for like a,
So we
Backup
do, that, and that
scenario.
is what we did, in past years where we went and said, oh, and, here are the warrant articles for transportation, for, the special student services, audit, things like that, in addition to that budget. So we would, it would actually go with what we were going for.
so I think, your suggested language in terms of the free cash for Mass Health revolving account and the, special education, the stabilization fund, why not get that on everybody's radar? And like, if we agree, and then in terms of the curriculum, it sounds like we need to have more conversation about uses.
I do think
But-
that, I think it's good to have the conversation tonight about these potentials and to get the, get the temperature
Get
of the
draft
committee on what,
language.
right, but I don't necessarily, in my personal opinion, not the will of the committee, obviously, that we don't go in March for these because it just, I feel like town meeting will be more receptive in May when everyone's trying to get a piece of the free cash. I don't know if that's naive, but I just feel like it's
It is.
more, But I feel like if we're calling ourselves out and we're the only ones asking for it in March, we're gonna get way more scrutinized and way more, like, attention.
Totally. And I think, not to cut you off, but just the three that we have here are free. One was obviously curriculum. I think that's the debatable one. But appropriate free cash to sped stabilization, appropriate free cash to math house revolving. The town has forced us to do things like that. I was opposed to the compensated absences. We won't go down that road again. But I think those two, 1 and 3, make sense because it's fiscal planning, it's long term. The town talks to us about that all the time, and I think those are two things where, with the free cash that the town has and the free cash that they've already spent, it's like that's a reasonable amount of money that's going to help benefit us long term and may help with that second one of being able to sort of play around with that. So
David, I want to piggyback up on that. Like, I think it shows fiscal planning. We will have just gotten out of our process.
Yep.
They're operational things. But having said that, if I take your point, Emery, and if like Sean and Tim would come back and have a recommendation strongly about May, I'm open to that. But if we need to get language around it, and you guys recommend it for March, because we can just present to town meeting and say, these are, this is our reasoning. I don't know.
And I'm on the fence. I'll say I'm on the fence with both of these. Certainly having some kind of funding for a revolving account, and the conversations very collaboratively with Mr. Pizzuko about having a revolving account, setting that up so we can get money in there, and then we can get reimbursement and fund that way. I think that one's something that we have pretty much agreement on anyway, right? Which is really good. It's getting the funding in there to support it. But as far as we're going to get to the end of the budget season, and there's a possible that the town itself is going to have the requirement to use a lot of free cash to balance the budget this year, right? Maybe, and I say this, $20 million, right? It's there in free cash that everyone will be trying to use for different departments, and I totally get that. So let's say that we get 1.2 million of that or $500,000 of that for stabilization, right? Well, we're trying to balance the rest of the budget. It could come, it might be reduced free cash on the other end. You know what I mean? So as long as we work with the town to get it in a way that meets our needs for student services and for our operating budget that we're requesting, I'll be happy with it. I don't want to tie anybody's hands either and say, all right, schools have 1.2 million now, nobody else gets anything else, and then all of a sudden what could have been supported by the town to close the rest of the gap for us just isn't given to us in that amount.
No, I
Totally, that's a great point. And so I would defer in that case, because we might make more discoveries too. I think is kind of what you're saying, that would make us craft our requests in a different manner or a different form. Yeah.
Teresa, I just, to piggyback on that, because I worry that if we jump the gun and come in March and we do try to get to the head of the line, right, and get some of this cash, that's one that when we actually go to budget season and say we do need some free cash to balance the budget, like the town meeting will be less likely to give it to us because we already gave you some.
But $8 million of the $28 million came from interest from bonds from school-sponsored things. I don't think we're jumping the gun. I think that we are.
No, but that is a separate conversation. We will talk about that, and that it is sort of apples and oranges. I get what you're saying. I'm not dismissing it.
Yeah.
Trust me.
No, I hear that.
But yeah, so I worry about the coming, and so one, the scrutiny, the extra scrutiny, because we're coming by ourselves
Makes
in March.
sense.
Two, that we get some funds, and then they say, well, you already did that. And then I had a third point, and I forget what it is. So Teresa, go ahead.
No, I mean, the reason I'm asking us to think about this a little bit more is because if we decide anything's going on the March town warrant, that language is due before we meet again, as you said, Anne Marie, so we would need to vote tonight on what that is. The May town meeting is about FY26. The March town meeting can also be about the current fiscal year we are in. So the second one on the curriculum, I think, is squarely a FY26, should definitely stay on our radar, but go to town meeting potentially in May if we decide it goes at all. The other two, I feel we could make the argument that it needs to go earlier, because having a mechanism of the Mass Health revolving account is something we've been talking about for about 3 years now. We had hoped it would have been set up already for FY25, and it isn't. And if you guys remember, last budget cycle, BBC and the Finance Commission had asked us in our current budget to have an offset of $550,000 in our sped fund. And I had asked the question last, like, February, March, April, what if we get to a point where, we need more? And there was a verbal discussion, not a commitment, not a promise, but a discussion that if we thought we wanted to add more money into the sped reserve, or we needed to protect that offset, that we could bring it back this year. And then I think March is the time to do that.
But Teresa, I don't think that we're gonna win that argument, especially with BBC or the FinCom, because as, Sean just told us, we're underspending that budget. We may not have to touch the 550,000 of that reserve. So we said, what if we needed more than that, or we wanted to protect the 550? If we may not have to touch it, that argument is gonna go out the window. Because that was the intent of that conversation, was to make sure we could protect that reserve, not add additional to the reserve.
Yeah, but there was also a question. I'm a little bit frustrated too, because the BBC process hasn't been playing out the way that it should, and our last meeting got canceled and never rescheduled. So we should be in a little bit of a different place right now with our counterparts in the town than we are, to be more informed on some of these topics. So I'm just speculating. That's all I'm doing is speculating. At our last BBC meeting in October, maybe, was that when we last met?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Early
Yeah.
November. We started a conversation but didn't finish around free cash and transparency and stability. And we had raised at that time wanting to get more money into the sped reserve. And I thought I was hearing from most people an agreement in theory. Now, I know not all BBC members are at that meeting. And then if we did have if we had a guarantee that we were getting the Medicaid reimbursement, we could potentially start to make some staffing changes this year already, right? That prepare us for what we definitely need to do in the fall. But what if there's a way to start doing it this school year?
I mean, we still have a lot of work to do with our staff and time of allowance for billing purposes and training purposes. So there's more to it than just starting it this year, I think, for the reimbursement part of it. Because they're going to have to be equipped, our systems are going to have to be equipped to be able to bill in the way we need to. And so there's processes that have to be set up that we know we wanted to try and work through, but they're not quite there yet to actually get the reimbursement yet.
I think in talking to the town when we presented our preliminary budget, the way we're conceiving this warrant article for the Mass Health money is kind of like the extended day. This is a warrant article to be a bridge to when we can get the revenue. So the warrant would help us move the staff to some funds while we get that revenue source and the claiming up to date, so that maybe in 2 years we can move it to the revenue. It's like a bridge to when we can get the revenue up to where we're expecting it to be.
You gotta spend money to make money.
when,
Yeah, exactly.
I believe it's called seed money. When are the warrants due?
January 10th.
Something like that, yeah. The
It's
draft,
January
just
10th.
the draft language is due in early January.
So,
Yep. And we don't meet until the 15th. So we have in the past given approval for
So,
the finance office to go forward with warrants, and then we vote on the language after the fact. However, I do think it is worth deciding tonight whether we do it or go to March or not.
so,
sorry,
You
we're
go
probably
first.
thinking the same thing. I was thinking we could have them put together a draft so that the town has it, and then we meet on the 15th, and we can always pull it.
And that's what we've
Yes.
done in the past.
That
I
was
would
my
like
thinking.
to make a motion to ask, Sean and Tim if they would draft language for, the first and third, possible warrant. So one would be the $500,000 of free cash to a Mass Health revolving account or similar structure fund up to 3 medically related service providers for FY26. And then the second, appropriate free cash for the Special Education Stabilization Fund to maximize the amount allowed under law, 2%. Total net school spending to fund any recommendation that may result from student services program review in May, June of 2025.
Is there a second on that?
Second, for discussion.
Okay, discussion.
I think it's a good way to cover, give us options, because we can, continue to discuss. You guys might have a stronger or new recommendation when we meet next. The budget subcommittee will have met, so, I think.
We actually meet the day before they're due.
Oh.
Perfect.
That was a good, that was a point we discussed. The draft language is due at that point in time, but after that time, if we want to pull the warrant articles, we can pull them.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. The town meeting.
Leaves the door open.
Leaves the door
Yeah,
open.
the Board of Selectmen doesn't vote on them until the 28th of January, so yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
A long time.
Just point of clarification, so we're talking about those two warrant articles for the March, and
Correct.
we're not deciding anything for the second one, if that were to go in May. We're not discussing May.
So that is
with
not
this.
part of David's motion.
Just double checking.
Yep.
Okay.
David's motion just for 1 and 3.
And I guess I accept the point of
No, there was no-
clarification.
No, that was just my
Just for
own-
Yeah,
March,
yeah.
the understanding that it's
Yeah.
for March.
No.
Nope.
No.
It's not
Just
for all
1
three
and
of
3.
them, yeah.
Bullet 1 and bullet, the first bullet and the last bullet.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood.
Sure. Any other discussion?
Anne-Marie?
Yep.
Just a question, I don't know if Sean's gonna remember, but I know it's primarily zoning in March, but are we aware of anything on the general government side that is going to be asking for free cash in March?
I do not know the answer to that question. He talked about the zoning piece. He did not talk about any particular warrant articles where they would be considering a move of free cash. It does not mean that's not.
Yeah, just curious, because I think in the October town meeting, there was some free cash allocated, correct, on the general government side?
Well, 10
And
million.
Yes.
with the timing of when motions were due and when we were figuring things out, like, we really didn't have the opportunity to ask for anything done, and we're okay without it, but I'm just cognizant of how these timelines play out in the general government versus the schools, and sometimes the deadlines don't work very well on the school side.
And I think that's
Intent.
well, yeah, it's intentional. I think that's intentional, obviously, because I think the intent of that meeting is the land use primarily, so that the timelines are not supposed to be kind to budget requests and free cash requests and things like that. I don't think it was. I don't think it's intentional. I think it's just they're not thinking of that. They're not really trying to be kind to that timeline. Okay, any other discussion? Oh.
Could you just repeat David's motion for me?
Yep, so David's motion is for Tim and Sean to work on language for warrant articles for the March town meeting for for bullet points 1 and 3, so the $500,000 in free cash, just jumpstart the Mass Health, and the special education stabilization. I'm not going to repeat every word. And then to draft that language so that we can, and submit it to the town by January 10th, and then we can vote at January 15th whether we want to move forward or pull those requests.
Okay, thank you.
Did I get that summarized correctly?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, any other discussion? All right, we'll go to vote. Teresa,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Joan,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
I'm a no, but that passes 4-1. So, could you please draft language and have it for
We will do.
January 15th? And then obviously we can review that in the budget subcommittee the day before they're due.
Perfect.
Give you a little. Okay. All right, so that actually wraps up 2 bullet points that we did not officially go into.
There's one more thing to mention about the budget, which we should keep in mind, is that the town did originally project 8% in the schools, and we have a preliminary projection of 8.1%, but there is a gap because 26 is officially the end of the override funding, and so there's, that's our preliminary budget at 8.1%, but we may be asked to lower that at some point in time, or we're not sure.
Yeah, I think the preliminary town projections were, about 8%, so we're right in
Yeah.
there. But
We're
okay.
right in line with the preliminary
Yeah.
projection, but the various committees
Yep.
haven't gone through their processes, so.
Teresa?
to that point, again, this is where I wish BBC met, because there was not agreement amongst BBC members of that number. It was a spreadsheet shared by the town manager. And then we started to talk about it, and then we never came back to it. So,
That is accurate.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to articulate without offending, so I'm not trying to offend or criticize anybody.
No.
But we really need to meet as a BBC, like ASAP in January.
Yeah, those were the exactly, that was our first BBC meeting. It was the numbers put together by the town manager to like approximate where we thought we would be in the next year. But you're right, there was a lot of discussion about whether they were appropriate numbers, and we never really got to circle back to that.
I will say though, good for Tony on this one. We hit 8.1%, which is pretty darn close to what he was projecting. So
His projections were pretty good, where he thought we would land.
No, again, I'm not criticizing, and certainly not you, Tim, or you, Sean, but part of that one discussion we had, and then I was able to have again, was those projections included infusion of free cash. There were some members at BBC who did not want the infusion of free cash into the operating budget, and then in those numbers, we were needing to cut, I think, by $2 million. I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So,
there will certainly need to be an infusion of free cash to fund probably both the town and the school side budgets this time around. I have no question, because we would have to reduce cost significantly if we were to not infuse free cash into the FY26 budget cycle.
But it's also good to keep in mind that the use of the free cash doesn't last forever. The town's been getting good free cash returns, and that may get through one more budget cycle, but eventually that dependence is going to may run out. I think we should keep a sort of more than 1 year look on things as well, to be mindful that we don't want to add a lot and then have to cut it in the following year.
Yep, and that is the fear of the FinCom and BBC. So we'll definitely be having those discussions, hopefully, moving forward. Ms. Jones.
Speaking of funding potentially drying up, do we have, sorry, this is off topic, but on budget, so I'm gonna take us on a pivot here. Do we have a sense of how much of our funding ultimately ultimately starts with the federal government? And I know the federal government distributes stuff to the state, which then distributes it to the town in some senses. And I'm just curious if I'm trying to get a sense of what our exposure is, right? If
Good question.
regulations end up happening, or if things get tied up, because that's what's been promised. I mean, right, the incoming administration has promised to get rid of the Department of Education, which is fine. I'm concerned about what our exposure is around around funding sources of that, and I recognize that is super complex, and I'm not asking for down to the nickel numbers, but if we could get a sense at some point, not right now, of what percentage of our funding that ultimately trickles from all of these different areas are ultimately connected to the Department of Education.
Yeah, that's a tall task, but the easier ones are like, hey, title money, hey, IDEA money, right? All those things.
Yeah.
The more difficult will be, so what does DESE get that they actually use to support our, that's. Yeah.
And I recognize that this is a Herculean task, but I do think that we're remiss if we're not at least taking stock of,
Sure.
Hey, FYI, 30% of the money that comes from the state actually doesn't come from the state, it actually comes as appropriated that way, right? We just need to know that.
Fair enough.
So that we're not caught flat-footed if some portion of that goes away.
Well, I think that's just a good part of long-term planning, too. Right?
Yeah. So.
Any other budget-related before we move on? Great. Thank you so much for that. I think it was a good discussion.
Thank you.
It's going to dominate our discussions for the next 3 months. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the long-term agenda review. So as per our protocols, we review the long-term agenda once a month. Essentially asking you guys, as usual, to take a look at the long-term agenda. I think we've actually rounded it out as we're getting a little later into the year pretty well. If you notice anything that's glaringly missing, definitely let me know. I'm going to bring up, just because it was tagged by Teresa on our for this meeting, but We do have, we are gonna need, to launch a student,
Student services
So-
search.
yes, Student Services Director search.
Yep.
When would that be appropriate to put onto the agenda? So that we have the-
Well, I was hoping, let's see, probably the 15th.
Okay.
I'm working on a draft timeline over the break, as well as taking a look at the job description to make any edits that we need to make to it. And then I would hope to meet with you to start getting membership for a committee and look at the timeline, and to make sure the job description is up to par. And I could probably have that done for you for the 15th.
Okay,
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
perfect. I think that was,
And I actually had a conversation with the CPAC families last night. They're a wonderful, wonderful crew. And I shared with them that we would make sure that we had their representation on that committee as well.
absolutely. Great, okay, I just wanted to make sure of that one, because that seemed like the most pressing to make sure that we got, early in the year. But again, if anybody, does anybody have anything that they need added immediately tonight to talk about, or?
Do we need anything with your goals and/or?
That's coming tonight.
Okay, great.
Um,
I looked at the agenda.
I will share that we'll have to have a conversation probably on the 15th about who's going to be representing the para, for the para Unit 50
Yeah.
negotiations, which we should kick off pretty soon too.
What is it go?
And then if we should have consideration too on the possible title negotiations as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Anne Marie, I requested the executive session earlier, an executive session, but I do think we need an executive session on January 15th.
Yep.
Around the union stuff. And then you do have my other comments and questions already in the long-term agenda.
Okay, so we'll go 6 again and we can post that?
That'd be great.
Yep.
I love 6.
Great.
Perfect. All right, anything else before we move on?
That executive session is for what? Sorry, I'll have to post it.
It'll-
January 15th.
January 15th at 6 for.
It'll be for, to discuss, I'll have to get the exact language, but it'll be for, because it's.
Non-union and
Non-
union.
Non-union and
Yep.
union.
It'll be collective
Non-union and
bargaining.
union
Collective
personnel
bargaining.
negotiations and
union
collective bargaining.
bargaining. Yeah. That one.
Experience, right?
That reason. I always forget the exact language.
It doesn't happen enough that I can remember it
I
either.
know.
Like, I have to go back and look at it.
We've actually been much better about putting in our agenda the actual language
Yeah.
from OML. We always did it for the appropriate reasons, but we weren't always great about putting that
We'll get it in there.
Who check-
verbiage.
Just like Desi.
Listen.
Who checks OML?
Okay.
Who checks?
No one now checks, that's who checks. So,
I was like, I feel like you just brought the
I know.
EY upon us. What's wrong with you?
We had a
Well,
positive
well, now we've been in
development.
compliance for quite some time, so, all right, so we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, middle school building update. I think I'm gonna hand this over to Mr. Hiltz.
Yeah, so I forget what our last one was, if we did one in November. I don't think we did. Maybe we did, I don't know. But at this last meeting, pretty efficient and quick. As I've said, we're under budget. We are on schedule for the certificate of occupancy by June 6th, which is kind of crazy, that we're getting there. And I know that there had been some questions and discussions around here, so not much to really report on. It was sort of just a regular business meeting, approval of things and that. I did formally ask the committee, and Alan Slater was absent, so it was Bob Donnelly that was there, but he said he would talk to, let Alan know and this. But I did formally pose the question that obviously when you do a building project, you're required by state law to have a composition of a committee that shares both schools and town, and you're sort of that shared responsibility for the build. And as we get closer to the end of the build, right, the life of that committee is coming to an end. But because we are so under budget, our projections is that we will have anywhere from $2 or $3 or up to $5 million left over from that project. I'd formally asked with everyone there just to get some clarification around what that looks like, that like if the project is done and there's still leftover monies, like how does that work? Who has that? Do you set aside you know, just from my experience at the school I work at, which is a new building, you know, like a fund, if there's sort of stuff that comes up as the building is open the first couple years to help fix things, you know, to revalue engineer things. So I had also asked Tim and sort of the school side, as well as Paul on the facility side, like, you know, is there like a list of things that we can get back in? And I say this because this is such a long process. We invest all of this money, it's one time, that I look at it as we should look to spend, if that money was appropriated and we came in under budget, that's great, but we should also look to then apply that money to that thing. So I don't know if there's anything, Tim, that we need to do on our side, whether it's talking to, you know, our lawyers or you, just in terms of what is the language around there, out there on that. You know, the town and the MSBC knows that was the question, and then also just that question of, you know, are there any needs that we can sort of revalue engineer back in?
And I think the, at our next meeting is when we're going to discuss kind of what kind of costs we can use the money for, any additional money that's left over at the end. And so we'll have that conversation, I think. You know, and I'm thinking about some different things that maybe we could use for the middle school, obviously, too. And I'll bring those to the meeting. So I think if you have thoughts of different items at all that you think would be beneficial to the school that may not have gotten into the project, let Dave and Teresa and I know, and we'll, we can bring that on that next meeting, which is February
16th. No, January
16th.
And just to cut you off and say that, I know just in a conversation that we had, one of them is like radios. Administrators need radios. You know, that might be something where we purchase a new set for the middle school, then whatever remains at the current middle school, you can sort of redistribute. So it's, you know, investing in updating that technology and sharing out, so.
And what did I just say? 5 million under, and we still got a snack shack. I'm super psyched about that.
I would just.
They did start framing it, so.
Sweet.
I would just say I did a tour this morning again, and it was just gorgeous. The work is going really well. Things are moving along, and what's some great attributes. The library windows, the media center windows have these like crosses with the Norwood emblem right in the middle. Like it's just fantastic. The fourth floor, like the floors are going in, and it's like really looking great right now. So
Looks like a school.
yeah, it really does.
It's exciting. Any questions for David and Mr. Luff? Awesome. All right, so we will keep moving along to our next agenda item, which is an update on the HR and financial task forces.
So I just did a quick memo to you folks on this, and I'll share it now. You know, we talked last meeting about our, you know, where we were with the task force at the time. We had met, and I think Anne Marie talked a little bit earlier about how we were looking at the financial task force and the kind of how it was originally envisioned by the school committee versus how it was written. And I would just share that, you know, right now the budget subcommittee, the BBC, for some part and hopefully some more school and town administration, we've all met to discuss the FY26 budget process, the priorities that we're looking at so far, and I think we're really working together to advise and discuss the preliminary budget and budget allocation processes. So I feel like that is in process and working well. You know, and I know Mr. Manning is working on getting that committee more formulated there together to bring them up, but you know everyone's working on the budget right now really hard, so it's hard to get them all together. So I think the work is happening. It's just a matter of.
We have an official meeting on January 6th.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. So.
For the finance task force. The HR one's had a meeting already.
Yeah. And I added the HR piece in here too. They met last week, identified their key stakeholders. They are here in the memo. Cheryl Shawn, Gina, John Ciccarello, Elizabeth Smith, Janice Whitebright, Jeff Kerr, Joe Kidd, Steve Olson, and Rosemary Meehan all met, started talking about what kind of comprehensive data they wanted to collect, right, as part of the strategic plan. So they're looking at different items like staffing levels, right, staff by department, by school, students supported by the department, students supported by the school. You'll see the recruitment and retention data they want to collect here. And they're looking at more ideas too as they go through this process. This is their initial brainstorm. Professional development opportunities and related data, and then employee surveys. So they're going to start looking at collecting that data to really work to on the 1B piece, and they'll get to the other pieces as they go, but that was their starting point for their meeting. And just a quick summary for you, just to let you know the work is moving forward and getting done. And obviously a conversation with you of if a member of the committee wants to be on that, There are no members of the town side committees on that, so the question is whether you want a school committee member on that too. And I think that's something that we can kind of keep a pulse on as we go, and if you determine that you want to have a presence, we can certainly do that at some point. I'll take any questions about this.
Yes, I will just mention, I'll just mention real quick that Sean, Ms. Leff and I had a conversation about this, and when I found out that there weren't any other committee members on it, I was of the opinion that we kind of wait and see and let the actual paid members of the, town and school sides meet and try to, get some things done first, and that if it became something, where we needed a little more oversight from elected officials to step in, but, one of the first things on here is, with expertise in human resource management, and I don't, I don't think any of us really do. So that was kind of where I stood on that, but I mean, obviously I am not the will of the board, so happy to, rethink that if we feel like that's necessary. But it was a little surprising to me that there are no BOS members, there are no FinCom members, there's nothing like that on there, so it didn't feel necessary for us to be babysitting, if that makes sense. Teresa, sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. I hear that point, but this was our thing. We're the ones that started it, not the Board of Selectmen, not the FinCom. I mean, it was in our strategic plan, and bore out of many meetings and conversations with Karen Sheridan and Dr. Taylor. So it doesn't surprise me others aren't on it, but I don't think that's the reason that the school committee should not be. And I thought you and I had said we would share the role.
We did, and that's what we talked about, that. And when the meeting happened, so my concern is that, do we need to do it right away, or do we need to, I don't want to do it just to do it, just to say we did and to have someone sitting there if it's not going to be helpful or add value to that other than just being at another meeting. Because it is human resources, and that is a kind of fine line, right, that for this, dotted up to the school committee. I don't know that it's something that we need to immediately jump onto and be in those meetings. If we can get reported on to us on how it's going, and if, the administration feels like it's productive and it's going the way it should be, maybe we don't need to actually be at those meetings directly, at least to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I just am cognizant of, obviously I want to be involved in everything, but there's a limited bandwidth with the five of us. So I just want to make sure that we're being judicious with our time. But I'm happy to, to not,
But it could
to be
potentially
overruled.
create scheduling challenges too. When you pull in a school committee member, it gets tricky with their hours and availability versus the administrators who are doing the work. I did want to say thank you, because this is good work, and I understand why, Teresa, it's been talked about for so long, and it's one of these things that we haven't been able to do because things have been on fire, right? And so it doesn't go unnoticed how this is extra, and so, but it's a great investment in terms of long-term benefits. So appreciate that it's happening, and look forward to the findings in terms of what improvements might be made.
Yeah. And I would say too, I'd like to thank Lisa for this particular part. I know she put together the minutes for this, and she had multiple other ideas she's sharing with, through email with everyone else afterwards, right? Well, what about these things? What about these things? So there's more to it. So there's a lot of investment, I think, on her end, and the rest of the committee members too. And you have a voice and a conduit through your assistant superintendent on that committee, right? So if you have feedback on these that want to go back and forth, you can have that. Like that's there. He is your representation on that committee at the time, as am I if I'm there. So I think I'm more than happy to have one of you kind of be a liaison, come in if you can. I don't know that it's necessary, but certainly you can. I mean, we can't force other boards, right, to come on, obviously, but certainly you guys have the opportunity to come on if you want to. perhaps we can continue to feed you the data from the meeting, and you can make a determination on whether you want to be there at some point to jump in, and provide feedback to the committee too,
Right.
through Sean.
And that's pretty much where I was with it, and, you know, when I say I didn't mean to imply that we shouldn't be on it because other boards aren't, that's not what I meant. I just mean that if others had chosen to be on it, I think it would be even more important to make sure that the representation is more even, you know, from all the different sides. But, I do, that's all I was implying with that. That I didn't, not to, oh, they're not there, we don't need to be there. But that if others were there, I think we would definitely need to be there just to be more evenly represented.
All right.
Teresa, I feel more discussion. Like,
We put this on a budget committee agenda again. I have things that I don't necessarily want to just say right now. I need to think a little bit more. And again, just the iteration of how this came about, why it was put on the strategic plan, and what are we hoping to get out of it. And if it's changing, that's okay. But I thought one of the major reasons we were doing this was to work towards that MOU that we don't currently have with HR. And that would be something the school committee would have to be very involved in.
definitely, yeah. And yeah, I think we should put it on the next, budget side to have a discussion. I mean, because by then we can probably get a bit better debrief anyway of, because Teresa and I did say we would share this, as the two committee members, so we can get a
Absolutely.
little more deep dive.
Bless you.
Does that sound okay?
Fine with me, absolutely. Bless you.
Okay. All right, anything else on this? All right, so we'll move to the next item, is a policy subcommittee update.
Yes, we met on December 11th, briefly and we talked about a couple of policies that will be presented to us on the 15th. And then we talked about the protocols. I'm going to draft a protocol sort of guideline, guiding principles document toward our school committee goals for us to look at on the 15th as well, as for sort of governing sustainability tool. So that's all. Tim, did you want to talk about what's coming on the 15th, those two, or
Yeah,
briefly?
So, there will be some updates to JKAA, which is the physical restraints of student policy, just to make sure that we're in line. There were some pieces in there, so our practices and procedures within the district are accurate and good. The policy has not caught up to our procedure yet, so there's a couple of minor changes that we'll have there. And we want to take a review at look at some of the tech policies that are out there, that were brought out in the newsletter in 2023 in December, just to make sure we're in line there. And I may bring you animals in schools, just to talk about animals on school property and all those kind of things.
Yeah, and we're not going to see tech policies on the 15th for this meeting, but just so the committee knows, we did start to talk about that last year, and it kind of went, it just got pushed to the
Yes.
side with other things going on. But I think where it left and where Superintendent Luff will be picking it up is sort of seeing what different schools are doing in terms of our different tech policy. You remember, Amber, we talked about this, and so we kind of need to get a better assessment of what people are doing. A lot of them, Joe said we're already doing, and we just need to formalize. But in terms of what use, the various use of technologies, we need to take a more comprehensive look at that. So that might take a couple more meetings.
Yeah, you'll have JKAA next time around, but not the other policies.
Right.
I will also say, and I wasn't able to share this at the policy subcommittee meeting because it just came up, there are some minor changes that we're going to have to make in the handbooks, preferably for this year from what DESE has reviewed. I would like to bring those to the school committee next time, just the changes.
Okay.
So we can get that down. I don't know.
Staff or a student?
This is the student handbooks. So I'll likely bring those to you next meeting too. Unfortunately, we can either try to schedule a quick policy subcommittee prior, so I can share them with you folks. I'm not sure if we have one scheduled prior to that meeting.
We're meeting that morning.
I can show you them.
Yeah, so we
Yeah.
can.
And these aren't changes that are really, you know, that we can debate, is right? These are
Right.
changes the state's saying you need to put these in your handbook, so I'll share them.
So the vote would be largely ceremonial.
Depends. Everything that Desi does is debatable. So.
That's it for us, thanks.
Definitely put that in the minutes.
Or does anyone have any questions? Joan, did you have anything to add?
Nope.
I just-
It seemed,
Sometime-
that was,
All right.
seemed fine.
Okay.
All right, any questions or discussion for the policy team? Okay, all right, so we're gonna move on to the next item, which is discussion of the draft school calendars for 25-26.
I am gonna, in a moment, hand this off to Dr. Munoz. JJ, you still there, just to check?
I am, can you hear me?
I can. So, well, this is very early for the calendar process, but and the idea behind tonight is just to get input, not to make any decisions on the calendar for 25-26. Now, we're talking about next school year, not the school year. Although this one does have to be in compliance with the 12 days of the state. Just
Can't do that
saying. This is still going through multiple renditions. You know, we talked to principals this morning. They had some feedback. Jody gave me some feedback today on some of the pieces that are in there. So we have more to come to you on this. We're seeking guidance and input from you on 3 possible drafts that we have to get us steered in the right direction for when we bring you a calendar and to determine what we would have to send to the community for any feedback. There are 3 particular calendars that are involved in here. They all provide for school start date after Labor Day, which is a question of whether we need to do that or not. That's also a question that came up this morning through some of the feedback. They all really all include, as discussed previously by the committee in past, at least last year, I believe, an early release day on Good Friday, and professional development days for staff prior to the beginning of the school year. One of the calendars has a similar number of early release days as the current year. We know that early release days for families is difficult in terms of after-school care, so there's a consideration that has to be made there. One of the calendars has additional early release days for professional development to really align our instructional practices to support kids the best that we can. And one I'm going to let Dr. Munoz discuss because this was his a dream, I guess. Dr. Munoz, is the best way to say it, his dream, which is a great calendar.
This is great.
I'm gonna let him talk about actually all 3, but he'll explain that one in more detail. It's actually a great idea, and I think thinking outside the box when it comes to calendars is really important because there's a lot can be done that can make instructional calendars better for kids and for staff. But I'm going to open these up, Dr. Munoz, and I'm going to let you drive from there. Is that all right?
Sure, let's go. All right, thanks guys. First of all, happy to be here. Of course, been engaged in conversations, and I love that we're engaging in this in December and not April like last year.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I'm glad we're discussing this now because we can have a lot of conversations and nothing has to be rushed. So the first calendar that I have up here, can you scroll down a little bit to make sure I'm talking about the right draft? Okay, yeah. So this one, I wanted to consider how we were going to add more professional development for our staff. And so this one added more half days to the year. It has the same start time as this current year where we started on the Wednesday after Labor Day. Students will still start the Wednesday after Labor Day. The only exception with the 4 PD days is that on November of the election year, we have to have school closed. We normally move to the PD day. There is no election this coming year. So therefore, we have an opportunity to shift that PD day to the beginning of the year. So we can have convocation, teachers work in their classrooms. We can have 2 full PD days, and then a day with schools in their buildings and department meetings before the school year starts. That's the rationale behind that. The added half days will allow us to develop some more cross-grade level content, department level content. We know that the 5-8 schools hopefully will be opening. So that'll give them more opportunities to cross-collaborate, whether that's collaborating with grade level teams. And if we're going to ever look at a PLC structure, this would be an opportunity to kind of start leveraging those opportunities And this will give administrators more time with teachers that aren't rushed by specialist times. Those are the big components of draft one. If you see the ERs in red, those are on days that we host professional development. Those are days when staff leave early. They leave early, obviously, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. They leave early the Wednesday before, the day before winter break. And then there's 2 of those ER days that are not color-coded differently, that are parent-teacher conferences. Everything else kind of holds steady, except for April. We made April Good Friday a half day versus no school that day. So that's easily flexible, talkable. I'm just trying to change the narrative around that and see what people think about that. And clearly, based on the results that Dr. Leff sent out today, or this week, that people are kind of amenable to it, making this a half day. So that's a conversation that you guys can clearly have. Version number 2 is the same beginning of the year start. We no longer have a November election day this coming year, so we move the PD day up to the beginning of the year. This allows the most time that students can be in school before end of the year testing. That's another rationale that I have PD days before school starts, because if we put PD days throughout the school year, then that also prolongs, and that's also less instructional days that students will get that is going to the back of June to make the year longer. So that was another reason that we did that as well. But this has the same number of half days that we currently have. And I do recognize that after this past year, I made the mistake of reducing half days. I think it was a 7 to 5. And so if we don't want to increase a lot of half days, I would want to ask eventually to have a conversation about putting the half days that we had on there 2 years ago, which I believe was 7. And I reduced them to 5. But everything else holds true still as version 1. The only difference is the amount of half days. That's really it. And then the one that everyone will either say, JJ, we're not talking about this, or laugh, or have a conversation about. This one is, I was talking to a parent that wasn't a Norwood parent. They were a parent in another school district. And we were talking about what they were going to do for the spring. And she said, I wish we didn't have February and April break. I wish we had a break in March. And so she had this whole rationale and reason. And she said it was easier for her kids and all that other stuff. Granted, that's one person and another district. But the whole rest of the United States, except for New England, has spring break in March, and everyone else does February and April break. What that allows us to do in this rationale, if we were to decide to go to that model in some near future, I don't anticipate this ever happening anytime soon because it's a lot. It allows us to get more instructional days before end of the year assessments happen. Not a lot of instructional days, but it allows us to get more. It also allows us to get out earlier in June when we have hot days when when elementary schools are suffering. So we would be out June 9th with no snow days, so that we wouldn't have to worry about the heat. And then nobody touches August summers, which we know some of you love August summers. So my whole rationale when I pick schedule is I think is what's best for students. And the more instructional time that we can get before end of the year testing and assessments, whether it's interim, whether it's MCAS, no matter what it is, so we can get our curriculum in more often than not, I'm going to try to do that. That's my rationale for picking the schedule. Now, principals have given me feedback. Like Jim said, we talked about with principals this morning, and I always come back and I'm going to have a conversation with everyone when they keep on coming to this. It's not my decision. It's going to be your guys'. It's going to be Tim's recommendation. I want what's best for students. Everyone has their own agenda. There's some things that I'll personally want, that you'll personally want, that principals will personally want, that teachers will personally want. To me, it's what's best for students, and then after that, what's best for teachers, and then how can we manage that schedule. That's the reason, that's how I approach it. And to me, when students have more instructional time, June is hard for them to stay focused for instructional time, so if I can reduce June days, I'll do that. So that's my rationale.
Thank you.
So obviously, there's been a lot of feedback on this. Questions around, the single days and the winter break, both at the beginning and the end of it, right, for kids and that kind of a thing. But it's another one of these long break timeframes, which is difficult to monitor. There's questions about, maybe kids starting the day after Labor Day, all these different things, just to and adding PD back to January. I've heard that both from different stakeholders and some of the teacher reps too. So there are different things that we have to consider as we move forward, but really this conversation will help lead us in the right direction to something that you would wish us to either look for more or say, no, don't do that.
And to just piggyback off what Dr. Love's comment is, we obviously aspired last year to have students start before Labor Day, and we didn't because it was very late in the game, and we understand that. Contractually, I think for the Unit A new contract, there's a certain day we can't start before, and so if we start kids earlier, that means we're moving PD days into the year. That means we're not getting out in early June. That means we're pushing June dates back. That's the only reason why I don't have a version right now, but I'm going to create one for students to start before Labor Day. But that means that we're putting PD days in the year, which will be 7 days with no school. So that's the only reason why I hadn't looked at it, but I am going to make a draft for that so everyone can look at it and talk about that. But that does make us get out later in June, at least 3 or 4 days if that's the case.
That's interesting.
So that was gonna be my question, because we got a lot of feedback from parents when we were too late, that there was a good amount of people who were interested in starting before Labor Day, having students start before Labor Day. So I guess that was gonna be what I asked, to see a version of that, because.
But that to JJ's point, like, it looks like that actually pushes us further out into June, because you're not having the teachers come and do their PD days before the students arrive.
Is that the case even in your dream scenario, in scenario 3?
That's what I'm
The
Well,
June scenario,
actually-
no, because we have 8,
You collapse.
we end up having 8 days between February and February and April break, where now we only get 5, so we actually, that's where it's going to become 3 days less. So that's where we get more days in June. I see Joan's hand up.
Yes.
Oh, I'm switching.
But I think we can bring a calendar also for consideration that has prior to Labor Day. And we can
Yeah,
see,
I
Well,
think
it would
and we'll
be
see what it
all
looks
the
like.
contract
And
states
just
that
all of
teachers
these
cannot
end
start
on the
before
12th.
August 26th.
So,
No.
just to, while we're still talking about that, so is that particular because Labor Day's earlier too, JJ? Like if this year it was later?
Yeah,
Last
like-
one's June 9th.
Yeah, I believe like the following year, Labor Day is on the 7th, and so definitely students will be, and teachers will be starting before Labor Day next year.
Yeah, it's, okay.
Yeah, so basically, so essentially what you're saying, JJ, is that because both the ones we have here say that they end on the 12th, if we start the kids before Labor Day, we might be to June 15th.
Which is still earlier.
Depending on depending on when we use our PD days.
Yeah.
And there's other days that people want to talk about, right? Like, do we use our December, do we go all the way through December 2nd or 3rd and start on the 5th? Like, that was a piece of feedback that we heard as well. Can we do that? Or do we say that we're going to break on the 19th and actually don't go to school on the 22nd and 23rd? Like, those are things that we're going to want feedback on, right?
Yeah.
Because
I think you guys are the one.
that's going to count in today's as well.
Go to school.
Joan wants them out of her house.
And again, looking for feedback on just different calendars, different
So,
renditions, just to
Joan,
get
I'm trying to put them in school, Joan. I'm trying to put them in school.
So unfortunately, for your dream calendar, if you throw a dart at New England, you hit us right in the middle, bullseye, which means like we're not even on the edges. So while I appreciate and understand that calendar, I think that calendar as a topic for conversation for next year is not feasible. So I'd like to remove calendar 3 from conversation for next year.
But why? What's your reason?
Sure.
Because
we have a dart in
We'd be the only
that was a
district
joke. We'd be
in
the only district in New England to follow a non-New England schedule, and we're literally smack in the middle of New England. It's not like we're an edge
Which
district
makes
where
it
everybody
difficult
around
for
us.
people to schedule.
And Joe, I would say we'd be the first
Camps.
district in New England.
There would be no camps. All of the people who have timeshares and all those other things based on February vacation wouldn't have that. All the there would be such significant disruption, and there would be no supporting infrastructure around us to support that.
So I would like to point out that many people who talk to me know that I actually am a proponent of year-round school. So I love this. However,
Not
how
for
many
next year.
hard things do you want this committee to take on in our
Yeah,
tenure? They are
not for
gonna
next
vote
year.
me out so fast.
No. If
I
that's
know-
something we want to move
I
to,
knew-
that's not a hey, let's talk about it right now and do it next year.
and
It's
just
a
in-
significant shift.
I also understand Joan's comment. I was expecting from probably all 5 of you, right? I just wanted to put on
You're
the table
welcome.
for a conversation to think about, because if we're thinking about what's best for kids, all I heard was adult challenges, which I get.
Dude,
because
what's
they
best
have-
for
they have-
kids is
they have
what's best for
but, like,
parents.
Year-round
what's best
school.
for kids
I'm
is
right.
what's best for
I
parents.
totally hear what you're saying, and I'm just curious why, and this you might think it's really obvious, but is it worth looking at why do private schools have that structure?
Because they're
Because they don't
private
have
schools.
DESE.
No, but
But not all of them.
neither one of those things.
But not all of them
It's
do.
true.
Not all of them do.
Substantive.
No, I know.
Private
they're-
schools have what the wealth differential between families that attend private schools and families that attend public schools is redonkulous.
No, I know,
Yeah.
but I think her question is like, why do they go so much less? They don't have one,
Oh, and they don't
like,
have that, yeah.
990, 180, so they don't have a required amount of days they have to go. They can just sort of make it up based off practice.
They have no mandates to educate everybody. There's a gazillion and one reasons.
No, I just mean like if, to JJ's point, if it's better for students and it allows
Yeah.
for more time on learning and they start earlier or they get, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's not as simple as that, but I'm just,
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying. And
Pri-
you can't
like-
like take the rug out from underneath people, and I totally get that.
I would argue too
But I'm
that private
curious,
schools in New
and I
England.
think it's worth.
Private,
Private schools in
hope
New England
people-
still do follow the April and February. for
Many
the most-
still do.
Mo-
most
yeah,
of them
not
do,
even all
yeah.
of them do. Not like I get that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
I understand.
I personally, I love it. I think JJ, good kudos for thinking outside the box and for looking
It's
at,
a more outside
for the
stars.
students,
I
the
just-
students, like, I think it's a
You're
good
welcome.
conversation, but yeah, I think we're not gonna be
Because
able to
private
educate.
schools that follow the schedule were feeder schools for colleges, and this is a college schedule. I'm pretty sure that that's the historical reason why private schools, especially upper elite private schools, high schools, they were built to be feeder schools for particular colleges,
So
right?
they're just used to it.
So you mimic what you were going to be doing, right? Come
I don't
to,
know. I don't know.
yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's the reason
Okay.
for elite private schools.
I guess
like
it's
a Milton
irrelevant
Academy
to us
or
then.
a Dana Hall or something that was built. Sorry, I'm going on tangent.
Okay, so off topic. Teresa.
So I'd like to eliminate that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just a couple of questions and thoughts, JJ and Tim, for you to consider as you're continuing to work on it. JJ, I actually do not hate your wish calendar. Having been someone who did not grow up in New England, what you presented is what I grew up with.
Yeah.
So it does happen. But I do understand Joan's point of if it were going to happen, it probably needs to happen not next year and a little bit more planning and dialogue with our community because it would be a pretty significant cultural shift for New England families. But I do see, appreciate, and have grown up with that type of schedule.
Yeah.
Couple questions. On all of them, half days seem to have remained mostly on Thursdays. So I was wondering if we have had any dialogue with the rec center since they took over our extended day program. They have requested to be able to offer half day services. Have they?
I haven't followed up with them. I don't know if Dr. Love has yet, but to your point, that they're just thrown on there as Thursdays. Like that's easily changeable. If we're saying that they're not better when we want to show up, that would be something that you guys would make, and I would have no problem going to that other model. I just have them there as placeholders, kind of.
And I did follow up with her, and we are doing some early release services, or they are doing some early release services. I don't remember which locations they hit yet, so that is happening. It's a struggle for them to staff right now a little bit.
As we expected.
As expected, but they are doing
Yeah.
that. And there are conversations too from different stakeholders about Thursdays in general being difficult due to special schedules, due to different things that are happening. So those are all conversations that are coming up too in the mix. So just so you're aware.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I know we had expressed, or I had expressed last year, I was concerned about always on Thursdays, always hitting the same families, especially with the current at that time structure of extended day. There was no care, but then you would consistently be paying for that care on Thursdays that you weren't receiving.
Yeah, and the other Thursday piece was, special schedules. If you have if a specials teacher has somebody on Thursdays alone, then that class is losing out on that special every Thursday. It's happening. You know what I mean? So those kind of things.
I think we did have a pretty even number of parents, though, who I've heard loudly that they would love it to be on the same day because then they can plan better.
There's
Like if
benefits
it's like
all over.
other towns around us will, do it always on a Friday or always on a Monday, and so there's that piece. So there's, yes, I hear that, but then there's an equal number of parents who, so you can't please everybody for sure. But
Sure. Just a couple of other thoughts. Did we go through and compare days off or not around some of the High Holy Jewish holidays? Because we have received some feedback in the last 2 years from members of our community asking if we could consider those holidays. Has that been looked at?
I don't know if.
Go ahead, Tim.
No, I did not look at that. My understanding was, I think Good Friday was the only one religious holiday left that was on the calendar that was being observed, really. Obviously, Christmas falls within winter break, but it's winter break, and that's a question mark too. But sorry, Dr. Munoz.
No, I was going the other end of that tree. So we were talking about how Good Friday should not be a holiday, so we shouldn't have some religious. So I was going the other way with that. I was trying to say, let's try to put people in school on other religious holidays that we normally observe, so that way we can be equal across all religions, and still obviously give students excuse if they have to miss school and all those other things.
And just
yeah, and I'm not suggesting we have to have holidays left. I think it was 2 years ago though we came back to school on a High Holy Jewish holiday. I may not be remembering correctly.
Yeah, it was
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I just want to make sure we're not doing that again.
We ended up having to push school start
Oh, I see.
back a day because I'm gonna screw it up.
Yeah.
Forgive me, my
Rosh
Jewish
Hashanah.
friends, Rosh Hashanah? Yeah, okay.
And just to be
I'll look into that. That's definitely not a problem. I'll look into that.
and just for the
Okay, thank you. And then, oh, sorry.
I think just for the parents and the caregivers and the students out there that do celebrate religious holidays and observe different religious holidays, there are no penalties, right, if you need to observe those pieces, regardless of a holiday in the calendar, right? So we still will respect those observances.
I think there was a recent issue about testing on those days too, so maybe a reminder about that.
Yeah, that
Yep.
was a big issue, thing I heard, was especially at like the middle school or, there were testing on religious holidays, and that was something we said we would not do, so.
Good. Good.
Rosh Hashanah is at the end of September this year.
Awesome.
You had another one, Teresa?
And then just the last set of questions I have that also maybe kicks back some of those to the policy subcommittee as well. A reminder, we said we would look at our field trip policies, and the reason I'm bringing that up here, if we do start to shift school earlier, like earlier in the year and earlier in June, in our field trip policies, it does talk about field trips for seniors. Can that happen after a certain time of the year? And we've already approved some field trips for next spring. I just want to make sure we don't then change the calendar that goes against that field trip policy. But then also just thinking forward, if we do start to shift our calendar, does that impact our policy in some way that we would need to change?
That's a good point. Appreciate that.
JJ, just in case you were wondering, I do not ever believe that early release days are good for students or parents. I know we may disagree on that, but
I know you don't.
I know, but that's because you don't see my kids hyped up in the morning. It's an early release day, and then they come home. It's an early release day. So I
We're
like
creating engagement, Dawn. We're creating engagement.
There you go.
around the early release.
You just told me how engaged your student was about early release day.
You create engagement around breaks too. So my point is I really strongly believe that early release days take time away from it. As much as I joke about it's hard for parents, it is hard for parents, but it also I think takes time away from student instruction. So I like version 2 of the calendars that you put forth. I still see we maintain a commitment to no school November though. In all versions of the calendar.
Got a couple of good holidays in there. Well, I mean, in fairness,
I know 3 of the holidays are
3 of the holidays.
Are holidays.
A half day before the holiday, and then one's the contractual student, teacher parent conferences.
Oh, is that what that year is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So that actually is like pretty.
All right, so I take that back. I'm impressed with that no school November. Good job.
All right, any other discussion? We're obviously not voting on these tonight. Any other suggestions? I would say we can go directly back to Mr. Leff and Dr. Munoz.
I'm voting for
One more piece
Sure.
of feedback. I think on all of them, we have kids coming back January 2nd. And JJ, maybe you mentioned this is something the principals brought up, but I do remember at some point Paul Riccardi being pretty adamant about don't come back and open your buildings in winter for just one day for utility purposes. So I didn't know if we talked to him about that.
You gotta give them
that's a good
something.
point.
And it's the longest, like next year is the longest holiday break we have.
Yeah.
So you've gotta give something. You either don't have them come back that first Friday in January, or,
That's hard.
give them 22, 23 off and then come back
2-3, like whatever, you gotta do something. Be
Yeah.
nice.
It's hard, but maybe there's a way if we look at it. We haven't finalized it yet. So, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
disagree with take another look, but if it is what it is, then.
So I'd anticipate some curiosity from the community about this discussion already, even though we know that these are drafts. So just putting it out there that we want to, we also talked about linking our documents to the agenda, and I don't know if
Yeah,
that's a
that's-
decision you guys can make.
We're voting on that next.
Oh, okay.
Well, the school committee goals, that was one of the things we talked about, the school committee goals.
Okay, I just, like, if we put a big watermark of draft on this so that, and then floated it out, it's just gonna be talked about, and I know that this is a iterative process, certainly, but I just want you guys to think about it.
I think certainly in my next messaging, the community, I will say that the school committee is considering, well, the administration has asked for certain guidance on certain calendars that we're not making any decisions on now. When we get closer to a possible calendar, we will be reaching out to the community for feedback.
That's it, okay.
You know,
great.
something along those
Yeah,
lines.
the people will just want to know that, yeah.
Yeah. And I just I want to thank Dr. Munoz for opening up a dialogue about good instructional practice and the calendar and things that could make things better for kids. So JJ, I appreciate the dream calendar too. I would always want 3 trimesters, being off the coldest day of the winter,
Yeah, I
off the
was
hottest
going
day.
to recommend the next year-round school.
I like
Come next.
air-conditioned schools and year-round, then the kids don't lose it. Listen, my kid will absolutely murder me in my sleep when he hears me talking like that, but
Oh, we could
Also-
get that by building another.
I also share with JJ that this would lessen the days that I could go skiing over the course of the year. So.
and personally and selfishly.
Right.
He did share that with me, and he let me put it forward.
March
so
skiing is
that's
wonderful. What are you
he's
talking
committed.
about?
He's
It
committed.
is. It's only 1 week though.
People love their skiing and people love Disney. People
Yeah.
love to
This is
flock
true.
to Disney.
This is true.
But I just wanted to say that similar to my colleague Teresa, I grew up in Ohio, and so it's not a foreign concept in that way to me.
I know
I'm
this
like,
doesn't
that
feel
seems
like
normal.
such a big deal to people who didn't grow up here.
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
like, what's the big deal, people?
Ohio doesn't exist in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it's not a bad
just-
idea, it's just,
okay.
it doesn't.
It would flip
fit
everything
here.
on its
Yeah.
head.
It would not fly with the cultural norms of New England.
I think JJ's trying to get us murdered. is
Thank
what-
you.
That's what I said.
Well, thank you very much for the
Thank you.
Yes,
feedback.
thank you. All right,
Thanks for the feedback.
any other discussion on that before we move on to the next? Wonderful, we could talk about this all night. Okay, so the next one should actually be fairly quick. So the next item on the agenda is school committee goals. So we met after our last meeting, we had a workshop to go over the goals. I captured them here. I want to make sure my colleagues who were there make sure that I captured them correctly. We did come up with 5 goals, couple of sub-bullets under a couple of them. But essentially, they are listed here. We agreed on them as, I think Joan was not in attendance, so there were 4 of us. But we wanted to formalize it and vote on them this evening. So they are here listed. So the first one would be to complete a self-evaluation 1 to 2 months before the election. And that is something that has been done in previous school committees with, I think it's an MASC form. Is that correct, Teresa? That we had linked it in during the workshop.
Yeah, it's through MASC, so they have they used to use SurveyMonkey, I don't know if they still do. But if we decide to do this, I'd be happy to reach out on them and coordinate, because they run the survey and compile our results for us.
Yeah, and that has been helpful in past committees to, really figure out where things needed to go. So the second one is to improve in community engagement. So sub-bullet under that, make meeting materials available online ahead of meetings. So, work with Joe Kidd and or Mr. Luff to get, and anyone else in central office to get that realized. And then update the school committee webpage, which we have woefully neglected, with actual pictures and actual bios. I don't think either of mine are there at all. Not because Priscilla didn't ask me at some point for it, but because I need someone to actually come to my door and bang it down to get that type of thing from me. The third one is each member to meet with him at least every other month, and these are not goals, but the point of that would be to provide historical context, to share our visions for the district, and sub goal. Obviously, we would like to see those scheduled meetings posted to the school committee Google Calendar, just so everybody knows who's meeting when, and we can kind of not police each other for, heaven's sake, but just kind of keep track of, who's meeting when.
So are we meant to post them to the school committee, or does someone control that, like Lisa?
You can, I mean, you
Oh,
have the
okay.
ability to you have, edit
I didn't know
rights.
if other people could see mine, though.
If you post it to the actual school committee calendar, so like
Okay.
if you choose that calendar,
Got it,
everybody
got it.
can see it,
Okay.
yeah. So what I tend to do is make a copy of it to the school, whatever it
Yeah.
is to the school committee calendar.
Okay.
And that was kind of an overall, we talked about that, that was not a separate goal, but just overall making sure that people, subcommittees and such are posting things to the school committee calendar so we can all keep track of who's doing what. The third goal was around policy, so we wanted to do one goal for policy, one goal for budget. So policy had some sub-goals of tracking system for policies for sustainability, catching up on the MASC updates, and setting up a maintenance schedule for policies.
So essentially ours, if I'd offer an amendment, ours is the same as budgets. It's just that all those things are going to be in our little handbook. I
Okay.
would offer, I think we shouldn't use the word handbook because it's like a subcommittee, it seems heavy-handed. Like, I think we talked about guiding principles or something. So
Yeah,
it's just
like-
gonna be a few-page document that's like, that encompasses those sustainability, ideas.
Okay.
But ours could be the same as budget.
Teresa?
Yeah, I'm also in that conversation a little bit differently and was seeing policy and budget separately. My understanding, as you bulleted it out there, Anne Marie, is like it's really specific catching up and then getting the committee ready post-election for carrying the policy work forward. Where the budget was more, so we have a school committee member handbook, and in that handbook there's a very small section on budget, but we can take that piece and turn it into its own budget subcommittee. The work of the subcommittees, having been on both, it is different in how it plays out. So I'm not on policy, so Kate and Joan want to wordsmith what they have for policy. I'll defer to that, but I don't want to change what we're saying for budget.
No, I'm not saying just change what you're saying for budget, except for the handbook piece. I'm just saying that for policy, it would say the same thing that budget says, but those things would be encompassed in the guideline document
For policy.
for policy.
So
So basically, our language would be the same as yours, and the bullets would just be contained inside our document.
Let's see, guidance.
So if you're on whatever committee you're on, you can expect the same sort of guidance, which outlines how that subcommittee works. In terms of catching up,
that-
Yes.
that's what we're currently doing, so.
Okay, so I just added.
We
yeah.
can just show you the draft and then you
Yep,
can see
yep.
it.
So I just changed it to complete a policy subcommittee guidance document, and then tracking system for policies, and so just made those sub-bullets under that.
Okay.
I do think that, I do remember the conversation, which as Teresa said about budget, a little more formal, just because budget has so much more, like, yearly requirement.
Yeah.
So.
You think it'll be a longer document?
I think so. Maybe not. It depends. I mean, we might be able to be succinct, but I think it will be longer than what you're suggesting for
Yeah.
policy, which is fine, which is completely fine. I think you have more catching up as part of your goal, and we have more of, we're already doing it, let's make sure the next committee members can do it as well. Does that make sense?
It does, but like.
But I do
just
agree
To be
that-
clear, like the mask guideline is gonna be about how to maintain mask updates. It's not just about, it's more long-term, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're talking about the same thing, just a little differently.
I'm just like, okay, as long as, but if it's put in writing, I just
Yeah.
wanna make sure.
No, that's
We'll see
fair.
what the draft looks like, it's fine.
So that, then the budget goal was to complete a budget subcommittee guidelines handbook.
Sounds
So,
good.
do these goals look good as written? Anybody have any questions, concerns, discussion?
So Anne Marie, just being the type A person that I am, goals are supposed to be clear and when we want them complete.
Oh, well we can definitely add that. What did we say?
So 1 to 2 months before the election would be by, what, April 1st, whatever the Monday is?
What's the election? Usually. So.
Okay,
Monday in
so
April?
Sunday, March 31st at 11:59 p.m.
1 to
Makes it
2
1 to 2
months.
not
Well,
the
what
2
is,
days.
what is the intent of the evaluation? Because wouldn't we want to take it and discuss it? I mean, what are we doing with the tool once we take it?
Well, I think.
Yeah,
But
I mean-
we're gonna be in budget. And then we're gonna have two people that aren't here, or possibly.
well,
two
we would
people
want
that
to
aren't here.
take the
Not gonna
self-evaluation
plans are.
before the election, because we don't want new committee members to have that responsibility, but we could still discuss it after the election. That doesn't have to be timeline sensitive, because you're right, because we'll still be in we'll just be finishing up mass budget mode right at the end of
Land
March.
town meeting.
Mhm. Land town meeting. So the election in April really messes with wanting to do just about anything.
Well, no, just the
Seven.
evaluation, I didn't think that piece through. But, I mean, I'm happy to do it, but.
I think we can still
Done
take
by-
the evaluation, I mean, that's fine, it will be in prime budget season, but I think that we won't have I really don't think we'll have the opportunity to discuss it before election cycle, if it's just realistic.
Are you talking about the self-evaluation of the school committee?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
What are your thoughts?
I don't have strong thoughts on completing a self-evaluation before the election.
Okay.
It seems like the election is the evaluation, right?
Oh,
I guess.
I know we talked about this in our workshop, but had we not started to do the self-evaluation back in 2017, there's a lot of things that this current committee sees as norms that weren't norms before.
Mhm.
And, as I shared with all of you, it's very important to me, the stability of the committee, whether I'm on it or not in the future. And there's a whole lot of things that we do right now, including how we run our meetings and our agenda and so many things that the school committee did not do when I first came on in 2017. And none of it would have been created if that committee at the time did not take self-evaluations and implement the tool and take it seriously.
I just don't think that doing it in that time frame makes the most sense. I would rather see
But-
us push that out to January.
But, I also think, and I know we have
January.
two people up for election, and we don't
Yeah.
know, but if we're using it as a tool, what if everyone completed it before the election? And then, I would like to get on the cycle, because I don't like meetings in July, and I don't like meetings in early August.
You don't say.
That we then could get on track, and we could use this tool, and in a meeting at some point in
Mhm.
August before we start, review that stuff, there'd be new people on, and then could also do a goals meeting then. And now we've just
Well,
aligned the
ideally, right, we
cycle.
should definitely be doing goals earlier than we are doing clearly
So
now.
if people were amenable to at least doing it, I'm amenable to
I'm amenable.
working with the tool.
I'm amenable to doing it 1 to 2 months before the election. For all the reasons everyone's already said, we're in the middle of 27,000 other things.
Yeah, but what if we finished it and then we got to use it at a later date? I think
What's
that's
involved?
still valuable.
Yeah,
Actually-
that's fine. Do it nice.
Let's just do it.
Well, then we wouldn't be putting it on the goals right now, because,
Well, no, it's still a good, you complete a self-evaluation, that's a goal. We haven't done that in a while.
It's so you're saying to do it in January?
No,
No.
just that this board is currently constituted, completes it before the election, and then.
When? It doesn't matter when?
Before the election, yes, so
Okay, so March.
March 31st at
And then
11:59
how long does it
PM.
take and what is involved? Do we just do it online?
Kate, Kate, in the workshop I had shared the documents that said the 8 characteristics of a school board,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, they're
the
in there.
brick from MAC and all those questions. So they take all of it and they put it into a survey monkey. I think it's about 35 questions, and you can either just rate yourself, or if you wanted to write in answers as well, you can also add narrative to why you rated the committee in the way that you did.
But we do it independently?
We do it independently, and then MASC compiles the results for us.
Okay.
And then they could either just give us the results, which if it was going to be the 5 of us, I would say they could just send us the results and we can navigate it through. But if we're saying we want to wait for the results until we potentially have new members, then I think that needs to be an MASC workshop.
actually, that would work.
But I also think that we grow and learn as a school committee, and I don't think that we need MASC to run a workshop where we're talking about some of the same things that we've experienced. I know that we have to do one, but I think if we're gonna have this tool, we as a committee should be able to talk about that.
Right, but
when
MASC
in
is
our
the one
goals.
actually administering the tool, so it does make sense to have them come back and,
I mean, but we know how to use the tool.
well, but you don't get the tool unless they make it.
Are there two options
shouldn't
to
talk about
do
what
the
we-
evaluation and look at them as the people who took it early before the election? And then the second option, is Teresa suggesting, is there another suggestion that we take it but then hold off on the evaluation until after the election?
Yeah,
With
so-
people who didn't take it?
So there was one suggestion to do it before the election and just talk about the results after the election, because the timing is gonna be kind of weird. Another suggestion was to wait until after we have the election to have new people and just do it later, and,
No, mine was have us complete it, but we then use the data later.
oh, so that's exactly what I said, but I just said closer to, okay.
Well, not let people get elected, do a couple months in April. The majority of your board is still doing it, you do it over the summer, and it's part of your,
Refresh.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Refresh.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right now. Yeah, we might be out of cycle right now.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine. If we're out of cycle, if we're out of cycle right now, we're out of cycle. That makes more sense to me than saying yes before April, when's the election this year? April 1st?
April
7th.
April 7th.
Before April 7th, we're going to create a budget, open a middle school, move all our staff around, continue to work on the Willet, and evaluate our superintendent and do a self-evaluation, because we don't want for our self-evaluation to be out of cycle. Why wouldn't we just move that to a time when we can do it better and do it in the summer and give people, whoever comes in April, a couple months, they can do a self-evaluation of what they've kind of been with for a couple months, they have some time under their belt, rather than looking at what people before them said, and then you can sit down and do it in have that be the July, August time where stuff is less pressing. Those meetings in the summer are less stressful.
Yeah.
I could get behind that, because then we could have MASC come and do a workshop when we're less stressed about.
Yeah, because you have
Just,
time.
I mean, if that's the will of the committee, then we should just strike the goal for now, because it's not part of this current school year.
Okay.
But all of us have different personal levels of stress and responsibility and work cycles, and summer is more stressful for me than the spring. But if that's the will of the committee, and we don't want to do it right now, then it should just be removed from this document.
Can I ask a broader question, because I don't think we got to this in the workshop. School committee goals in general, we're saying 24, 25. So is that the intent, that we will, it's just for the school year? Or are we saying that we are gonna look, because we are school committee members year round, so.
I
We've
would
been
say
doing,
goal
I mean, if you look at the schools, it's been July through June. We've been staying
Yeah,
on
that's-
the
Yeah.
Okay,
But I think we should start moving to a goal cycle of when school, so August to June. Because then you can take that summer meeting to think, reflect, plan, and go again, just like the educator cycle, just like the administrator cycle, just like all of the goal cycles.
Which argues even more for moving this into the summer.
Yes, so let's just take it off. I think that was the compromise there.
do I need a vote for that? We didn't vote on them, so I would like to check if everyone is okay with that, because I don't wanna just.
Would you like me to make a motion?
That makes sense.
Yeah, would you? Because that
I'd
would
like
just
to
make
make
me
a
feel better.
motion to strike number 1 and move it to the summer for an upcoming cycle for goals.
Second.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call. Teresa?
No.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well, so that 4-1. Strike that, but I will keep it as a, for future addition to the goals. Okay, so that does.
We've got to start on our 2025-26 goals already.
We did, actually.
It's an ill time, Joe.
Oh my God, all right.
So-
It's 10 o'clock at night.
This was only supposed to take 10 minutes, so. So I do want to make sure that we are, because Teresa, you're right, we should have timing for these. So improving the community engagement, do we have any, I mean, really the timeline on all of these would just be by then if we're saying August to June, by the end of June.
Now to June 30th.
I mean, does that work for everybody, just to kind of,
Yes.
like, I'm just gonna add that broadly to the end, unless anyone has, like, any more, like, I would say that if each of the, subcommittees, like policy, budget, wants to put more
I think
granularity on that timeline, that we can do that individually, but I think what we should just be putting like
I think
an
that
end date.
the point of the guidelines was for new people though, so I think for those 3 and 4, you could put, end of March. Does that make sense?
Wait, say it one more time.
The point of these guideline documents, the handbook
Oh, right,
for
right.
some subcommittees, is to be helpful to new members, so.
I think just along the same lines that we just talked about, I think we're gonna be so into the actual work of getting like the budget done that I don't know that.
I think it's just gonna be like drafting them, looking at it and approving,
Yeah, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I think we're in a different place with our two subcommittees, to be honest. So the two of you on policy are up for election. The two of us on budget are not. And we typically reorg June. So if none of us are up for re-election, I would say a June timeline of this is fine. So for budget, I keep June. For policy, unfortunately, I do think we have to have that done by March.
Okay,
I
okay.
agree.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm
Yep.
good with that
That makes
for
sense.
us.
By end of March.
The good news is you already have a timeline for meeting with me. It's every other month.
There you go.
All right, I think that. Just gonna add this so it's here. I mean, I'm saying by end of June, but that's just because that would be the last time, but I mean, we should be doing that like immediately. I think this
And Marie, on that first on student engagement, I think updating the school committee page makes sense for end of June.
Yeah,
but
no, I agree
when
with you.
When we were in our workshop, it sounded like we wanted to try to get our meeting materials available online much sooner than that.
Yeah, I actually, as soon as I put that,
Can we
thought
say,
the
like,
same thing.
Ongoing.
No, I think we should put like a goal date. I mean, we should like, and I don't think it should be that long. I mean, this is something we can definitely get done.
No, but it's like a practice. If we can get it started, then.
Well, yeah, I think
Go.
we need to have something in there, like when do we want to like aim to have this done, like started by, like when do we want to be able to tell the community you can access these materials now? Like I do think it's going to take a little longer than we think, and I want to give us leeway to make sure we're working with Joe to make sure that we're doing this the right way and not, exposing any sensitive documents. So, I mean, can we say end of March? I know that sounds like a really long time, but I would like to say we'll have it done way before that.
I think that's fair. I mean, if it requires another system implementation, right, to do that.
Yeah.
And keep it secure and those kind of things, then.
I feel like Newton does it, maybe Mr. Mannion could ask how
They
they
do it on a Google Drive, and
The Google Drive is
That's-
public, correct?
yeah, it's a public
But it's like
public Google Drive.
Obviously non.
It's not connected in any way to our other things, so it would require talking to Joe about how to make that happen here, because it's not currently set up that way.
Okay.
Any other changes, any other questions, concerns, discussion about the school stock? Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the goals on the goal stock?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. Second by Joan. Any other discussion? Okay, Teresa.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Joan.
Yes.
David.
Yes.
I am a yes as well. That passes 5-0. Mr. Luff, can I ask that we get somebody to put this on letterhead and we can sign it at the next
Yes.
meeting? Does that work for everybody?
Perfect.
Great, all right. So, moving on. Superintendent 360 assessment.
Yes, so a lot of this was discussed last time, but I did have a quick memo here, and you guys can pop in if wrong. But Chair Mazzola, Ms. Stewart, and I met yesterday to discuss questions to be asked in the 360 assessment, as well as persons who they will be asked to. We also talked about a specific tool to be used. We agreed yesterday that central office direct reports, principals, and union leadership would be the members that would provide feedback for my assessment. Members and quantity of persons would be as such. Principals, one from each level. Central office, that would be 3 cabinet members and or the confidential secretary in the office, and union leadership. Members can be either chosen by the school committee, or you could even make a request to those groups to say, hey, we need 3 representatives from who would best represent, this team of direct reports from Mr. Luff in answering questions to the committee. The idea is that data will be provided directly to Lisa using a Google form that I would not have access to. And Ms. Stewart in a moment will discuss, if she has this answer, the anonymity of the work. So here are the questions that we're considering. Does the superintendent regularly visit your school or observe your practice? Did the superintendent work with you to complete goal setting? Is the superintendent's presence and feedback to you meaningful? What is your overall feedback regarding the superintendent in terms of maintaining meaningful progress toward the district and school goals? What are the strengths, what are the areas of strengths for the superintendent, a more general one? And are there any areas that the school committee should consider for improvements? We added those in even though they weren't directly tied into the goals and the indicators, but because we thought it was a good way to get feedback from those constituents. And Teresa, did you have any luck with Melissa today?
No, unfortunately, Melissa and my schedules just have not been aligning, but she did say she'll get back to me. Just as a reminder to the committee, in the workshop, we were discussing that the responses would be anonymous, and then we were just trying to finalize with our attorney if it could be anonymous to Mr. Luff, so he doesn't know the person why. But the question was, would the school committee members be able to know who said what, or would that only stay with Lisa Liff on the Google form? So I'm waiting for that response from our attorney, and then also I sent her the section from open meeting law that does seem to indicate, so obviously we as elected officials, our evaluation of the superintendent is public record, public knowledge, but there seems to be a category in the open meeting law that says for people who provide evaluatory feedback who are not public officials, so all the people we're talking about here, principals, directors, union representatives, that their feedback would not be public record. So we just wanted Melissa's final say on if we were reading that part of the law correctly. But I can inform the committee as soon as I hear back from her.
And that shouldn't modify any ability to make a recommendation on these particular questions and persons tonight. So
It would just affect maybe the quality of the feedback we get in the end.
Yeah, I mean, just nothing is anonymous, so we can't say it's anonymous.
No, we weren't saying that it would be not because like somebody's gonna know. Like
Yeah,
Lisa's
that's what I'm saying.
Lisa's gonna know.
We've been using
or,
the term anonymous, which
No.
is confidential to Lisa.
Right, exactly. That's
That's
a much better term. Yeah,
That's
confidential to Lisa, or even confidential to only the committee members.
Yeah, I don't think I want that, but okay. I don't want to know.
We might. Right, it might be just a point where we know who, but not exactly who said what, and that it might be obvious sometimes because if somebody says something very specific to a union, we might know, but if it's more broadly, we wouldn't. So you're right, but somebody, you're right, is going to know.
Yeah, Jen, that's a very good point. Confidential is a much better terminology.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we've ever done a 360, and we appreciate that Mr. Luff has agreed to it. So we just want to make sure that we are doing this efficiently and effectively, but also fairly to everybody involved.
Yep. Okay, so we're looking for a vote tonight on these guidelines for the 360. Does anybody have any other questions, concerns, discussion?
Motion, do you need a vote?
Yep.
Motion to approve.
Moved by David, seconded by Joan. I will poll. Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
No.
And I am a yes, so that passes 4-1. You had me there because you made the motion.
Well, no, I
I know,
get that
I
we
know.
have to do it.
I know.
It's just my personal thing of, we won't get into the assessments,
Nope.
but the process, so that's all.
All right, so next item, tech collaborative agreement, Mr.
Yeah, so I've been bringing this to you. I gave you a heads up that Sharon and King Philip Regional School District have requested to move into or enter into the Tech Collaborative Agreement, the Education Collaborative. The Board of Directors, which includes myself on last week, actually approved their movements, and now it goes to all the school committees that are part of Tech to approve or not approve their membership. I believe it takes 2/3 votes of all of the school committees to either have them enter or not. But I do recommend the addition of the 2-member districts. The new draft agreement is there for your review, as well as the letter from Emily Parks, who's the Tech Executive Director. So I do have an action requested tonight for you to approve the Tech Collaborative Agreement, including the addition of King Philip Regional and the Sharon Public School Districts as member districts to the Education Collaborative. But any questions or conversations or debates?
I just have a question. Does this impact our ability to send students to Tech?
It does not.
Like, it doesn't decrease the number of seats available?
Only for the Tech online classes.
Okay.
And we don't use all of those, the ones we have anyway, so that would not impact us that way.
The only question I have is, when it talks about approve the new collaborative agreement, is that simply that they're adding those 2 schools?
Yeah, there's a couple other, like, dotting the i's, crossing the t's things in there, grammatical things that they modified to the agreement, but those are the 2 primary pieces of the agreement that were changed.
Motion to approve.
Seconded by Joan. Any other discussion?
Can I just briefly follow up on what Joan asked and Tim's
Yep.
answer?
Mhm.
So, it does reduce the number of slots we have for the online classes. How many slots do we currently have and how much will it change?
We have up to 80 seats per year, and so 2 additional districts would have access to seats there. Tech pays tuition for the students in member districts, so we have up to 80 now, and so there would be a slight reduction in those. We have,
How many do we currently use, Mr. Love?
I'm sorry, say again?
How many do we currently use?
Up until this year, we didn't use any. So I got that when I had the conversation with Tech, Emily, when I first came here. I realized that we weren't using any, and we started using them just this year. And I think we have probably 4 or 5 right now.
So this is why.
Oh,
All right, thank you.
okay. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay. Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank
You might be the first committee that did this, because they just did this. Congratulations.
Got
Number
that
1.
right out of the way. All right. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the school committee norms. So we discussed our norms. We did not change any of the norms, but we wanted to make sure that we voted on them as a committee, and then we will sign them again.
Because the letterhead.
And letterhead, yeah, and the date, this was, Dr. Thompson is still on here. There's definitely some updating that should be done. So again, these school committee norms have not changed. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is right now because my brain just shut off. But I put the old ones in here for you in the packet to see in case anyone had any questions. But does anyone have any questions, concerns, or a motion to approve?
Before we talk, can I move to approve it first, but move to approve the school committee protocols as written with the changes of updated to reflect the date that we pass it, as well as the update if we remove the old superintendent's name and add Tim's, and then we can sign off on it.
Yes.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, seconded by Joan. Any discussion? Okay, Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so that passes 5-0. Could we please have those changes made and
I have a note. I will
Us to
make that,
sign.
have it done.
fabulous. All right, that brings us to consent agenda.
I want to move to approve the scholarship first, and then due to conflict of interest laws, I'm not going to leave the room, but if you guys need to approve all of those, there's one that is a family member, so I'm not going to vote on it.
Okay.
So first, move to approve the new scholarship. I'm going to butcher this name. I'm sorry, Lee. One of you want to help me?
Chiregio, is that?
Lee Chiregio High School Scholarship.
Go with that.
I think that was a pretty good attempt, actually.
Sorry if I got that wrong.
Okay, do I have a second? Seconded by Joan. Any discussion on this? All right, Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So that passes 5-0. David, do you want us to pull out that specific donation so that
No.
it can be voted on separately? Okay, so you're just gonna abstain from the whole
To
donation.
leave the room. For reals, if you're saying
Yeah,
it's conflict of interest, you have to leave the room.
You're not debating it, you're voting on it. Just
I
have to
don't- I-
excuse
I-
myself. I think I'm right.
You might be,
Possible.
but that's not what the state ethics lawyer said.
Joan and I have had to leave the room. I've had to leave the room the most.
Okay, so then we'll go over donations. So, do we want to describe the different donations? I don't know. if we-
Sure, I'll just, for the record, just say Bay State Bay State Textiles, a Thanksgiving basket donation, an LMPA playground donation, which is adaptive playground equipment for our young kids at preschool, and Oldham bike rack donation are all on the consent agenda for tonight, so you're good.
Okay. Any discussion or questions on those donations or move to approve?
Just a quick question. Oh, sorry.
Sure. Do I have a second for discussion purposes, please? Teresa or Kate, would you second it for me?
Oh, okay. Discussion.
Thank you. Okay, now discussion.
Yeah, just with the LMPA playground donation, just because we've kind of struggled through playground donations in the past. Mr. Luff, to confirm, you have received everything you needed, and it was also approved and discussed with facilities?
Yeah, not only approved and discussed with facilities, but they did a walk around the site with facilities and all that to take a look at where it could go, what it would look like, to make sure it didn't conflict with any projects that we were doing with the resurfacing over the summer. And so, yeah, Mr. Riccardi was very much involved in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
The same goes for the bike rack. It looks like Mr. Riccardi signed this in October, so.
Yeah, that one happened quite some time ago.
Yeah, this one we unfortunately kept forgetting to get it onto the agenda. Okay, I'm glad it's on there though before the end of the year. Okay, Teresa,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Joan,
Yes.
and I'm a yes as well. So that passes 4-0. We should grab David for our school committee agenda. Thank you, sir. Okay, that brings us to the school committee agenda. I'll start with Teresa. Do you have anything tonight?
No, just with the winter break coming up, I hope everybody is able to spend the break in whatever manner you hope to. And I'll see you all in 2025.
Kate.
Nothing here, the same. Happy holidays, and hope everyone can rest or party or all of that good stuff.
Joan.
I hope everybody has a happy break.
David.
Nope.
I also hope that everybody gets a restful break or parties or both or all of the above, because I think you should just do it all in your nice long break. Have a great happy holidays, and thank God we've got a couple of days left, and then it's the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our meeting. We do not need to go into executive session. This is it's still very foreign to me because I did it for so long, putting us into executive session. I do need a vote to adjourn. I need a, yes, thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Kate. All those in favor? Oh, no, I got to poll because we're, Teresa?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Joan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We will be back on Wednesday, January 15th at 7 p.m. back in this room. And we hope you will join us. Thank you very much.